有恐怖，远离颠倒梦想，就近涅槃。三世诸佛依般若波罗蜜多故，得阿耨多罗三藐三菩提。故知般若波罗蜜多是大神咒，是大明咒，是无上咒，是无等等咒，能除一切苦，真实不虚。故说般若波罗蜜多咒，即说咒曰：揭谛揭谛，波罗揭谛，波罗僧揭谛，菩提萨婆诃。
认定的意思是，请大家可以开始念皈依发心。
Refuge and Bodhicitta.
要我来开始念吗？听到声音吗？好像有点。
听得到。
哦，好。那要开始念皈依发心是吧？行是。我上节举当初级就能了，想就巴德当年就是大概因素级别错难级，除了并且上节如果就上节举当初级就能，想就巴德当年就是级大概曲线级别错难级，除了并且上节如果上节举当初级就能了，想就巴德当年就是级大概曲线级别错难，除了并且上节如果就听不到，可是国民的是，可是国民的是，一听。
Apparently someone said they couldn't hear.
有声音吗？假如有的话，请大家跟我说一下。
有声音。
有的。
哦，可以听哦，可以的，好。请回。你也把呀嘛说，你嘛说，你么？那我别见的过去就。다른 진짜 초야디 자유 가생에만 가서 진짜 니마 송린 거 초요래 아니 다른 양 못되네 준투 지진이다 상동야 또스 공수를 저 지진이 지지야디 오토 지진이 있어.
Now, with regard to today's class, well, as before, Rinpoche said, as he taught before some time ago, he also taught for 3 days. And basically, what Rinpoche teaches today could be seen as a type of continuation. So to continue with regard to a new topic this time, but still a continuation from last time.
인진의 치디강라 가서 미세기 비제딘데 게 요마레스 다 이내양 다 뒤준도스라고 그래 당가라서 참말라 뒤준도 상류나로라 강에 치티디고 그러다 가디나다 상상지 수수지고 데데베 카톨라 심마지고 차야당 심버 추디야당 로송 심버 추디야당 다나 신시 나다 랑디야당 딘데기 강에 망보지 체디고 그래스 어디 강에 체비 카톨라 알랭에라 수수 생기 나로라 지 마지고 차야디 좀 조동 토야당 现在俺这浪的就是这里把交动推起，顶着自己生看对应那样，去希望去当大那些给生了一地我的看对，去马拉不去，看对呢马拉不去呢伢儿推起，的许多外地给什么通过都是，
Now, today, Rinpoche says that he won't use any particular text, but rather talk about the Dharma in general, in the sense that he says, in general, well, we always have certain problems. We have mental problems. Time and again, we experience different mental difficulties. Sometimes we're unhappy. Other times we're confused, we're distracted, or we may experience fear and anxiety. So the question is therefore, at that time when we don't feel happy, well, is there something we can do? Can we actually change our mind? Can we do something about these problems, transform these problems, remove these problems, and generate a state of mind that can be described as inner peace, of well-being, satisfaction, without losing these types of mind, these types of mental states?
ngaransu sanglu nanglo la kanye kachu yonggu yobati ngaransu tu jundu nima riri nanglo la nganchu nyangsu nyongdi gores susu nyanyo tuni hakudi gores re dita ina sanglu chi tangchi chini o nima chigi nanglo la simba machi wa kachu yonggu tu ani yang chi mi se gi kanye tindi chibe katu tila simba machi wa kachu yonggu tu ngasu sanglu chi tang 다 상루지 땅에 수수를 채비 강에디 가수지 신부인바다 다 수수 뒤준도 딘데 강에 레베 카토딜라다 동네 제마 투버 제신데 심바 방마부 차시 심바熊제신이 로 신슈 차시시니 다다 개 용사 말에 상사 딘데기 베 신슈지바 냥마부 차야기 딘데기 강에 용구 여버디 다 말한수 냥뇨 나로라 That's not like city course.
Now, when we talk about these problems, if we reflect on our own thoughts, so many of our problems, many of our anxieties and so forth come from the mind, come from our thoughts. We experience problems on a daily basis. So this we know from our own experience that we have these difficulties. And so it's helpful to just know, to reflect on what are these problems on a daily basis. Now, how many difficulties do we actually experience, to get a better understanding of them. And also what's important is to learn how to face them, to face these problems without feeling discouraged, without feeling depressed when problems arise. So in the sense that, yeah, there's no discouragement, or we don't feel discouraged, but instead we face these problems. So to reflect on all this, of the possibility to face problems, but also to become more aware of the kind of problems we have.
다 지단다 가랑수 취지스러 디강라 다 취지긴디 지당기 취면긴기 미당 다 민다오스르지 고교로 지당기 취면긴기 미당 민다오징 아주 지고로 다 지기요르디 자주기 취디 고랭당 민다오스르 취세디 무진제당 민다오 차지진 다 취지스러 디강 다 상제기 구순的지긴 되了你别并不自己下车对我自己的节了说다那些个下车当我人主要当다 지들이 다 야기 체도下坡节了说当초보 표에了说当我当了说当다那些米了就无偏别上上不去去呢米了就无节了说的等待几讲了过来看呀用这个我
When it comes to, well, Dharma practice, or those who practice the Dharma, well, when we compare a person who practices the Dharma to someone who doesn't practice the Dharma, we can see that there's a difference. We can actually know, again, from our own experience, that these two types of person differ. Now, with regard to Dharma practice or religious practice, well, there are different types of religious practices. Again, there are differences between the different faiths, differences between the different religions. But usually what we identify as Buddhist practice would be, for instance, when you have the a statue of the Buddha statue representing the Buddha's body. You may bow before the Buddha, prostrate towards the Buddha, generate faith, do circumambulations, that is circumambulate the Buddha's body, practice purification, purify negativities, make offerings, recite mantras, or based on warm-heartedness, benefit others. All this we may identify as Dharma practice.
소그래 취지에서 어디간라 다 다른 나라 순디 루루치에 지기 마시 지기니 엔트워트니 제를 수고 된듯이 제시시니 디 용디고라 뒤뒤를 미망부지 루루치시는 데만 된듯이 용교어 다 딜러양 취지에서 된데 타니 다디 용디고래 양 된데 많이 버지시니 취지에 디 신디이 당닌다당 다나신기 준노롱시 조야당 엔다나신지 벤주 조야기 치에들 놀라딘데라 놀지라라 수어더야 딘데라 지 고린데시 디에지 용디도
Another way by which we can talk about, or another way to think about Dharma practice, another way to understand it would be, for instance, us here coming together. That's a type of Dharma practice, that someone teaches the Dharma, other people listen to the Dharma, then questions are asked and answered, or we recite prayers together. All this can be also called Dharma practice. Or, on the other hand, it's also possible that you have those who practice the Dharma or use the Dharma to enhance their fame or their reputation, who may use the Dharma in such a way that they accumulate, well, they use it to accumulate more wealth, more possessions, and so forth. So some people may talk of that or claim that that is Dharma, the practice of the Dharma.
마시지 가생에만 딜년도 쇼뉴 킨디 차규에는 당에 단단 넘어서 통구면도 인자 통규에는데 라와 장세 실례시어라 인자 하고 마송 다 가생 마시요 가생에만 년도 쇼뉴 킨 딘데시 임바 있는데 무신님 버스는지 차들이 그 멤버이나 다른 도스가서 양년도 다 취치니스로 추그래 다 간다 나랑수 상류 지 중들지당 생了편别好细节写这些年一叔叔的写给英文呢即港片基本用入简单上几个图呢写你给英文呢哦到底年纪呢叔叔的刚刚的特别靠多了拼图约吧几档好细的别几档呢刚刚的细推刚刚修穷动推全部呢被啊我用啥的上说的真的几公路 number 大吧公路咱们几个图呢第准备呢，但俺那种都是去前年节都是这些节的短的点么几不恰的个了，马这边俺那是不如了个，但毕竟南路的送不赢呢，你去因之后的恰因过的，但这南路人之后社区的去因之后的咯，就是去因之后有的去个初步做当，但去个这些年那不做当，当然是年度去个切都年度从的跟参谋了，但同么的了还是我的。자식들이 쉬고 그러베 다디 지 가수당 가능한 토네 아니 성지당 자식들이 쉬게 되버디 유스 디 총송스
I see. Well, Rinpoche says actually there's something else he would like to say before he really starts with the teachings. Well, Rinpoche taught previously also for a few days, and at that time, well, many of you who are present today may have been present at that time, but Rinpoche can't really see you, so he doesn't know whether you're old acquaintances. I mean, that in the sense that he's met you before. Otherwise, also he could also ask you to raise your hand whether you've been here before. But again, because he doesn't see you, he can't do that. But anyway, well, actually, when it comes to Dharma practice, in terms of changing our mind, helping our mind, engaging in activities that are beneficial for our mind, that would make it really meaningful. So in the sense that you have someone here who teaches the Dharma in this context, someone who's listening to the Dharma, and based on that, if then we are able to reduce our problems, we're able to enhance our happiness, our well-being, and so forth, that would be really good. So that should be our motivation. It would be really meaningful if you have the motivation to reduce your problems in such a way. And in the texts, it also talks about, for instance, us coming together here. We're creating this Dharma relationship, which is one of the most profound relationships, the deepest relationship we can have with others, this Dharma relationship. So as Dharma friends, the relationship of friends, the relationship of like a Dharma teacher, and so forth. So having said all that, Rinpoche would like to encourage you to generate the right kind of motivation and say tashidele to all of you and welcome you with this. He's very happy. He's very glad that we had the opportunity today once again to come together here. And so based on a positive motivation that you've generated, he says this is such a great opportunity, as said before, so to deepen our relationship, to have this Dharma connection, and to make this very meaningful.
다 다른 가수 마티에 다기 공도 쉬반 하신래 나랑기 저월라 넘버 2를 핀토야기 저거 침부지기 다양 디리 미수수수기 지바민다오 요래 옹부민다오 요래 디인디간라 징알레 옹부 누워다 다나 신기지 시로 치고 딘데 임바이나 지제는 핀도 매바양 핀도 디자 매바 오늘양은 핀도 매바 딘데양 차시바레 제디다 나란다 옹부냥바다 지바지바틴데 용축으로 단 나딘 잠블린 디강라 인터넷이 레디강라 나단 자오틴데양 용축으로 양 쇼진에 진낭수지 왕기 상동당의 디주제디 나래 림바 마오틴데양 용시바로 용축으로 딘데 인디강라 나랑기 무이네 이 상루지 땅리에디다 상루 자침보다 다버리시다 리를 공장이 순항신시시니 주쇠 차상 공장인데 딘데도 용구요 말자 딘데도 수장의 용구요 말 용구요 말이 상루지 땅거다 뒤준이 나랑기 상낭부도 뒤 거기 취시세디 비제지 키지지는 비제 말로진 시제해디 취시요래 요 말스나 다디고 디 시제지 시고로 시제지 치지 마시고다原年记的嘛乐于而的第5年的去些被这人这个越南面那多少个但去些是的讲了去些经济刚才叔叔的5年的去些的是的那上届中间的去什么到底上届可能的突厥了娘娘家长是那些的娘娘的米个把送过了这第一的讲了叔叔了越被娘娘起的娘娘种差距起상당 드렌드리지 연구도 세지 디比较没能这个的叔生港的乐들어就是顶多是蛮多分享啊想跟大家分享写结尾那么如我下结尾呢季节的点点拼图也不用个上点的去过个都是
Now, just today, I mean, as to the subject today, well, Rinpoche's great hope is really that he's able to benefit you. So everyone, of course, has different expectations when it comes to this kind of class here. And not just do we have different hopes or different expectations, but also we have different mental capacities. Now, if Rinpoche says, if he had a greater mental capacity, he was really intelligent, he had a lot of understanding, it's possible that with this kind of capacity, it's not really able to benefit you, as opposed to just being like all of you. So therefore, Rinpoche feels is actually just like everyone else, has the same mental capacity, and feels therefore he is able to make some contribution in terms of benefiting you. If on the other hand, due to some conditions, it's of course also possible that Rinpoche's mental capacity is lower than everyone else's. That may of course also be the case. But anyways, there's something Rinpoche says that he thinks about quite a lot. And he says, well, thinking about this, of course, he doesn't have the time and the space, or basically the time to think about these aspects when it comes to the Dharma, just like a meditator up on the mountain. I mean, it's difficult to do this all the time, but there's still something Rinpoche really reflects on quite a lot, which is, what does it mean to do Dharma practice? What does that actually entail? So like teaching a text, for instance, well, yeah, of course, it's important to understand a particular topic, but does it really become Dharma practice? Does studying a text, well, learning it, explaining it, and so forth, can that really be called Dharma practice? So Rinpoche says he has his doubts when it comes to that. Buddha himself, well, he experienced the Dharma. To have an actual experience of the Dharma, Rinpoche feels that's what's important. So to not just generate intellectual knowledge, but to experience the Dharma. This kind of experience, that's what's most important. To really internalize the Dharma, to put it into practice in such a way. And that can be even done without a text. It's okay not to follow a particular text. Even without a text, it's possible that we here, having come together, that we share, and that Rinpoche shares with you the Dharma, and he feels that's beneficial.
经常查在原地讲了，是吧？网络原地讲了，拼多的进不多。但因呢，我是讲说，你看的基础都是中期进的气温能信息用途我们多，都是各个级别有不一呢。但现今的两种的是那里上东亚的嘛都是这些叫洋上去当现实的，但他说是年轻属于上去当，当然上当年的了多巴当。草案他们的定的用地方那样地爬些，定的就两种别人结为呢，在定定漂亮眼嘛，狼人马蹄塞当牛蹄塞当羊蹄塞，就是这里拉面永远是都是把什么蹄起呢？他说但足足能行，定地的地的行足足能行。定这些今年羊蹄的牛蹄马蹄就是这里定这土年用不多，但用蹄塞是当个蹄塞的。기겐지기 기초 망보지를 반도 다기 쉬워는 신 비체지 키치신 지시전에 치원이나야 그 만지고 말에 딘데 카가지를 다 오네기 친구마디다 용치다 양치 마치세 디수제들 디나니 양치다 용치세 자디베 치나니 치체 투슈들이 양용 마드는 시에들어 그래서 딘데 인디강라 맞수 디낭신지 랑랭 想学狼藉人不恰生的用最切吧能行，定期用马头那样低了必得起，但低了必得起，低的查不起卡的解决度，那所以定查不顺的起，单单的解决有的孤独是恐怕不你钱的清不一呢，拼度没到有的生度。
Now, with regard to teaching the Dharma, what is beneficial when it comes to teaching the Dharma? What is beneficial to students? Well, one aspect or one way to teach the Dharma is to give experiential teachings. So to have a Lama, to have a teacher, an experienced teacher, who then teaches a particular point specifically according to the needs, according to the interests of the student, and then addresses, for instance, certain doubts that the students may have. So a certain aspect of, for instance, the Lamrim or the graduated stages of the path to enlightenment is taught. Then they have questions, the questions are answered, their doubts are removed and so forth. So in that way, or the doubts are addressed by, basically removing them. So this kind of teaching which is like a realizational teaching, an experiential teaching, is highly beneficial. Of course, there's also a different type of teachings of like a textual teaching where a teacher basically comes with a particular text and just teaches the meaning of the text, not based on this kind of experience and realization. That's a different way. And Rinpoche feels that's also okay. That's also beneficial. However, when it comes to this particular type of teaching style or a particular type of teaching in terms of realizational and experiential teaching, well, that is really amazing. That is a really beneficial kind of tool. Of course, it's difficult to teach the entire graduated stages of the path to enlightenment or to teach the Lamrim in such a context, but we can just take that as an example. I mean, to apply or to utilize, to use this kind of technique, this kind of, even if it's not based on the Lamrim, but to use this technique of experiential or realizational teachings, and in that way teach the disciples, teach the students. So Rinpoche feels that's extremely beneficial, that kind of style of teaching, this experiential or realization style, as opposed to just teaching like a textual teaching or scriptural teachings, where, as mentioned earlier, a teacher just comes with the text and strictly just goes through it without approaching or without addressing the students' doubts and so forth. In the case of the experiential teachings, it's such that also the disciple practices right away what the teacher taught, and in that way, his or her doubts can be addressed very effectively.
西当上路课，俺妈学的上当一个电台去过了，新，中大些个上段一个什么继续过的，上路马当被空的了，可是俺妈俺说，需要的，的那些，他旅年是了，因那是苏电当地这的旅那个去对当点不些吧。他给现在的上是，就是加上去突然呀去，的明白因呢，但是是就卡说的，给这样都是账目这些呢，他那些种些脱手，就学的但是，脱这些，真的单位呢，都对这个那样，因是不做呢，拼图起，用个月啥的个，卡说拼图起，对脱呀的嘞。就是旅年主要的，可是俺们学个那些，可是俺们的那是需要的，这当技术的。他第讲呢，你弄强了跑个赛的，中国多少年前没拿到了，弄强了跑个送来的，既当俺让来上的来月，他光马这边工的了，自己为定义的马工被工的了，弄入赛的，他弄入赛是个人，弄强了跑个是个人，第的。你不的结果也8月那上顺着的前2月，但现在也库朗了，5月就是没些9月的3不起来这些，看意思呢，修路多钱，明年的这些的那些，这些县里边县里边卡萨个了，县里卡说了大概能行是了过来，比如能行卡萨个了爬就出就去，被西湖去初步恰的的浪上，电岗的雇主的工地岗了，县的恰的话了，卡说了县是初步修恰的话了，的浪上没把岗下来的这里。卡了上当吧，因那地讲了，浪上下海的，浪上跌蛮推起。第一地讲了，俺了新北蛮多，先当年水晶，新北多子嘛，水了不还算的水个切度，你弄强了破个地，积极过来，但地蛮因为我就是定这样，过用过来。现在定这地讲了，上了嘛当被工地了，都是略这几年，开始俺们学那些，但俺说地了。1年5、1年当1年5、1年当1年5、1年当一个送这样，即1年呀5、1年嘛当一个干什么的送去5等不起我说几个月吧，就是第但那么出那地方了，的那么人呢也不要的，的结尾呢，贵阳kurang拼图图。
因为他跟越南原中。되네 유엔네 예수 되네 굿 간절레브레
니가
오케이
Now in general Rinpoche says, well, he thinks it's important also when we listen to the Dharma to adopt a certain position. Now, Rinpoche spoke about this previously when he gave his previous teachings, when he taught mainly about meditation. So what kind of posture should we adopt? For instance, the 9-point posture that is usually described. That would be something that is good. I mean, if you want to meditate, for instance, or listen attentively, it may be helpful to adopt this posture. But even if you don't apply all the 9 points, well, at the very least, it would be beneficial if you had a straight spine and if you could elevate your behind a little bit. So in that way, it's easier to keep your spine straight. And that is beneficial to, well, listen to the teachings and to meditate, of course. And Rinpoche also talked about something else that may be beneficial in preparation for meditation. So one aspect that the Lamrim, also the great Lamrim, talks about, so the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment also mentions, which is to calm our energy winds. So this kind of calming, well, here we're not even talking about meditating on concentration, but just in preparation for any type of meditation practice, it is helpful to calm our energy winds. Now, for instance, usually our mind is very much distracted. It's described to be like a monkey. So in the text, it talks about the monkey mind, which is unable to really stay focused. And in particular, just before you meditate, if then you chat to another person and thereafter sit down to meditate, well, your mind will automatically focus on what you just discussed with someone else, with the other person. It will not remain on the object of meditation, on the topic you want to meditate on, which is why it's important to first calm the mind in such a way that it turns neutral, that it becomes neutral, and it's not distracted by past and future thoughts. There are, of course, other reasons for calming the mind or for calming the energy in the way in the way just described, or there are other reasons for doing so. So anyway, the technique that Rinpoche described last time during the last teachings Rinpoche gave, well, is the 9-round breathing technique, where 3 times you breathe in, you close your left nostril and you breathe in only through your right nostril, and breathe out by closing the right nostril, but breathe out through your left nostril. You do that 3 times. And then you do it exactly the other way around. By breathing in, you close your right nostril and you breathe in only through your left nostril. And when you breathe out, you close your left nostril and breathe out through your right nostril. Again, do that for 3 times. And then the last time you do it through both nostrils equally. So let's do this together now, to do these 9 rounds of breathing, first through one of the nostrils 3 times, then 3 times, 3 times, and then through both nostrils. So don't count with the mala. You just need to count in your own mind. So you should do this practice together with Rinpoche as just described. But don't count, only count mentally, so don't count with the mala.
tindeji tadi 장가 구디 다고 구송버레마도 니바지 말에 종니 진레 중아 진레 니슈자지 진레 또 심바 마 로마티 순르지 마차기 바도 데지마 수수이나 안레지 별로 순르지 차순 상상 순르 tindeji 바도 지는 리고 장가디 생기 지기 신다 진야디 신는 담의 신다 진야디 제티 파도스 유 판도스 예 매버차 인데스 흘려는 차다 다랑기 고버 고버리
Now, having said 9, or having talked about it as, or having described it as the 9-round breathing meditation, well, that is just a suggestion. Basically, there's no rule that you have to do it exactly 9 times. You could also do it 12 times. You could do a 12-round breathing, 15 times breathing, or 70 and 21 times breathing. I mean, however many times you want to do it, we want to do these breathing rounds. It's totally up to you. Since the point of doing this is to transform the mind into a neutral type of mind. Therefore, it's important to check whether the mind has become neutral, to check whether the mind is still distracted or not, and just depending on that, do the meditation.
마소 도신다 지당 마소라 강연 체디라 마랑조 수수라 동해 용해디라 리니도아 리니요다 르르 때네 용배 동해 지요레 다나신 다 르르 마디오 총시시네 강연 체디 마임바체 르디도 슬르지네 유베거라 세나로라 상로 동당기 왕기 낭돈 담다 망부 총지시 수수 생기 나로로스 담다 망부 코디디강라 엔지 녀모비 루티수 지치시니로 마제지 차도지 뇌자지 시당지 엔다나 생기지 녀모비 상로 베샤샤와이나 진짜요로 지 자파세든 하다 가르유스 수기 자바다 자발은 망부도다 미현den기 자발을 수바 한다나 신기 베샤샤나 지신 아쿠디의 두자 시부두 상상기 된제기 지 두자 예정에 지 제국도 지 렌지 로고 녀버지 제국도 상상기 녀베 상바 야오 당하다 집에 개침부에 지 참말로 개침부 된제지 차디유 쿠기가라 지지 제마소 니니 제마소 세틴데기 수수배시부지 짜친부야 지대기 랑친생기 상로 쇼친부 근데 레시신 세나라 녀모비 넘버 도비 룸암부 레네 디진지시네 심바 추데야 심바 마치바 차데야
So I didn't finish from what she said previously. So he said, well, basically through this technique, then it's important to let go of these distractions, to let go of any kind of disturbed mind. And once you realize that your mind has reached such a neutral state, you can start to meditate. Then Rinpoche said just now, well, when we talk about suffering, when we talk about our problems, there are actually 2 types. There are, of course, physical problems where we experience physical pain, but then there's also what's called mental suffering or mental pain, which means that at times we may physically feel very good, we feel relaxed, our body is calm, but our mind is very disturbed. So we have all sort of distracting thoughts, and that may give rise to a lot of problems. So we experience a lot of mental problems. Why? Well, one reason could be that we experience different types of afflictions or afflictive emotions, such as arrogance or envy, competitiveness, aversion, attachment, and so forth. So those are the kind of main afflictions that we may experience. But then there are also other ones, such as, for instance, a sense of haughtiness, kind of feeling full of ourselves because of our physical appearance or because of our mental qualities, whatever is the reason, this feeling of feeling full of ourselves, being haughty. or the wish to retaliate if someone has harmed us, for instance. So to kind of retaliate, to help harm this person, to inflict on them what they have inflicted on us. Or there's a sense that we are more important than others, that our happiness is more important. So a type of self-centeredness. So all these.
세상 다 딘데지 디간라 배는 가수 또 수부 마디오 중치신 다 수부 마디오티다 넘버 나수 바로 나세기 진지 수부 마디 차요레 다양 지 슐루기 진신인데 배는 수부를 두추베이나 아니 종어 추치치네 종어의 템베 난 종어 류긴 종어 추유디간라 종어의 템베 자다 롱다 디수체 추용고레 디수 추용디 딜의 템베 센디 동행 용용고라 간스는 종어 추지 추용디간라 지 가서 종어 추베 지야 지야 이도 명원스라고 그래 야면은 간다 지야 동행 때리기 지야 인데지지지 디진지지네 류츠르기 동해지 류츠르기 동해 내용디가 디진지지네 심바 마디와 차죠 디조 상마 류단저요 그 디시고 말다 디쿠 디진지샤 다 류르 템비 류 진종어 추벌의 띠니 좀비 동해 디조 제디 간데스 용거레 슬로디가 딘디시 자란디 카가지리 디 디진 신다진도 마도 양 디시지 토네 용도 말해 다다나 가수 시대디 심바 세랑기 나조라 로 난도 나초의 진지진의 심바 추야당 나타레디야당 다 나초가 다디 망보여 신 shum바 다나 신기 가수래 수수수수다 지 이제제마 되서 간다 다디 용투자 말에서는 로 마음발랑하는 데지도 용사 말에서 이제 레마트 디자는 마세베 야 가수 간다 된데레지 수수기 진 되베 된 디수테디 만두가 이나 간대 차용 상상기 난다 몸불리되지 안 다나신베 태다베 저어든데 레데신도 저어цел레 겨 저어디 외의 창베 저어디 잡은 지고르고 루투고레 디마인바 외네 수 외네 수당 메창베 상보메베 저어 지 태잡든데 아니 다나신기 도바치 잡든데 사만로 도바사데스로 근데기 도바 이진지진이 심버추데 신의 강에 다 망부질레디고로 생기 강에 마치슈지 근데 가서 그래 류기 동에다 카툰데요 요 말에 세상 류기 동에다 류다 만지에 다 이루르데 이진 넘버 10발라 템베 강에 디수제디 로 디슈워다 나게 쉬에디.
So basically, Rinpoche said previously, well, it's any type of problem that arises from the afflictions. And so just now, Rinpoche said, well, of course, we can also feel unhappy due to physical problems we may experience. So there are different reasons for having these physical problems. They may be caused by diseases, by sickness, or someone may hit us with a stone. So that leads to mental pain in the sense that, well, the elements they change in such a way that some imbalance is created due to sickness or due to some injury, and so that affects the energy wind in our body, and the energy wind being closely related to our mind, it also upsets us. So in other words, we feel mentally unhappy because of a physical unpleasant experience that we have. So there's this physical feeling of unhappiness or of pain, which in turn has an effect on the mind. But Rinpoche says that's a different type of mental unhappiness, and he's not talking about that. A different explanation is required when talking about mental unhappiness that was caused by physical pain. Here we talk about mental problems that are purely based on the mind, that have been only created by our own mind. So having a lot of distracting thoughts, having a lot of negative thoughts, experiencing fear, for instance, experiencing depression, feeling low about ourselves, or lacking self-confidence, having the sense that I can't do this, I can't do that. So lacking a kind of confidence in ourselves. And of course, there's this anxiety or fear that we're fearful we don't accomplish what we want to accomplish. So that kind of fear of not being able to do what we would actually like to do. Or our expectations are too high. I mean, it's good to have certain expectations, to have certain hopes when it comes to the future. However, sometimes they're just not realistic. So if our expectations are too high, then again, that can cause a lot of problems. Or if we all the time have kind of doubts, we always have doubts. We're always suspicious. We have a lot of doubts, or we have a lot of suspicion. We're suspicious of this person and that person. So all this can create a lot of mental problems, a lot of mental difficulties. Now, they are not directly related to the mind. They're only indirectly related to the mind. But sorry, they're not directly related to the body. They're only indirectly related to the body. They mainly come from our mind. So all these different states, previously Rinpoche spoke about the afflictions, and now here these kind of mental kind of problem we experience, such as anxiety, fear, too high, having too high expectations, being too superstitious or suspicious, and so forth. So in such a way, that's a different type of mental unhappiness that we need to address here, or Rinpoche would like to address here.
뒤준도 나서 통토해지 수수기 하고 토해지 가르치하게 두스나 다 류르 템베 가서 그래 되어동해 지요래 다나시 이루르 템베 되어동해 지요래 다 디니니부디 가르케치도 가르슈치도 다디강라 이루르 템베 되어다 동해니디 슈치오제 류르 템베 되어다 동해니부디 슈총임버디 세브리 가르슬로디강라 생게 나올로 니도당 이디오디 슈치무슈 주여이나 류르 강에 여이나 류르 마디오 여이나야디 마디오 임버 미초로지 로 마지부 예상상지 잔매되지 류르 강에 요르 류르 나사지 수부디 가서 주부차 하나베 네번 자다 손데 틴데 손데 차디 여이나야 생나라 제낭시부 주여이나 마지부이 상마도지가 도부인 상부지 잔이 미소라지 생나라 제낭디 여이나다 수부주부 여네야 생기 디소로 생낭기 제낭디기 류기 동에디 바시기네 되지 다양 도쇼네 생라 베시부지 만다다 강에 여이나 수부지부시부 여이나레 수부 잡아 칼라 가레산이 두나 여봐 가레 동니 두나야 여봐 가레 괜히 두나야 여봐 가바 데니 두나야 데서 여봐 다 시기 차진 베 차상 니메 세 매대기 딘데기 베 차진 편송 소바 여봐이나야 로다 주부 좀 사매기 탈로 거디 여봐이나레 심바 나롱아다다 마지부지 유디강라 마지부 민도 세지마도 수부 차진 야부 여봐디 수다 르르 때문에 가서 그래 르스르기 디워 때리지 진 상만 종대 그렇고라 이나 디주 대줄라 만소지 디주 통용된 순나지 지지네 나 자심발라 상상 순르지 세상 용어디도 딘디가라 생라 동에 여이나 르르 디부 차야기 주진 가수여냐 배만 되지 디 뭐에 수레다디
So usually what we really need to know is that there are these two types of unhappiness, that one type can come from the body and one type comes from the mind. And actually, when we talk about these two types, especially like mental and physical pain, for instance, mental pain is so much stronger, or also mental feelings are much stronger than physical feelings. So physical experiences and mental experiences, the physical is not as dominant as the mental experience, or the mental feeling we have, the mental pain. So this is very clear. For instance, if we are really determined, we're full of courage, we have this incredible inner strength, then even if we get sick, even if we have incredible physical problems, we feel extremely weak, we experience we have a very serious illness, we have to be taken to hospital. Well, but internally we are well, we're satisfied, we're happy, and this physical problem can't really affect us. If on the other hand, physically we don't have any issue whatsoever, we are well, everything is going well. Well, then, if then at this point we are unhappy, well, then our well-being, our physical well-being, is basically outshined. This is the Tibetan term here. So like it's suppressed, if you like, or it's outshined by our mental unhappiness. So it's very clear that of the two, physical and mental well-being is the more powerful one, is the one that outweighs any kind of physical problems. Now, as to the example of physically everything going well. So for instance, we have no problem, we have no disease, we are well fed, we have good clothes, we have enough to wear, we have an appropriate accommodation, we have a good house, we have a roof over our head. So basically, our body is is healthy and strong. We have a lot of friends. We're very popular. If at such a point, if at such a time, our mind is unhappy, then even physically we're well, we still have a lot of problems. It won't help us basically. So we'll feel unhappy, we'll feel depressed, despite our physical conditions, despite of our physical conditions being so conducive. Therefore, it's important to understand this difference here, that the mind is more dominant than the body. That is reality, Rinpoche says.
Nāng sānglu tūne, sānglu tāngdāng ki tūne, sēn la dewa rū tō guya di rūju ju yuwa nari da, rūju me na mātsu kēshī ya yo maro. Da kēsī shuru ji jīn la dūba me we, dū mu gu bar, nāng sēn ki tūne, sānglu tāngdāng ji ki tūne, sēn ki dewa ji rūju yuwa yi na, di hā le we tsa chimbu, kē chimbu chā ma sōng be.
But it is actually possible, Rinpoche says, to reach such a state where we have inner happiness, inner well-being. If it was impossible, we don't even need to talk about it. So Rinpoche says it is actually possible that we can become totally independent of the outer circumstances. We can experience a deeper sense of well-being, a very deep sense of well-being and happiness, without having the sense we're lacking anything.
다 나랑도 생긴 항로라 공도 쉬바 낭신 녀모비 넘버 2 베지 녀모비지 나츠바 지엔도 안담도 참마리 디참마 라 디참마 집에 가도라 주다 진민다요 토네 아니 생지 딘도 녀모비 루이 진민다민다도 진용거래 디다 수수수수라 님부 딘당 민다민다 제디 요래 로 카데 조당 di ma shu chung tong dang ki top mi rao di yung biyo re. Di yin di gang la nga tsuyo ki dari sanglun da sengi nanglo la pecha xa na nga tsuyo la di sang kangen chi shu di shumba ji ye dire na nga da yung ma re se ki sen na kangen che de chi. Ani nga nda shu chimbu le de ni da na sengi karasa gore da chi kundu shuchi mala mikashi kundu shuchi mushu yungu warada mikashi es la yake mendo pena ngarang la chatsenba ina kundu ki kange mambu chi idwa ro shiza dindiga kundu sundashi leba ina kanjes donglin che gore se dindegi ri kashi shuba ina ani digi pa toshi di pa dos kapu chi chine kirwa ngasu kaso gore nyomo bilu 마수 심바 추주긴기 뇽모빌로 다 진슈 신다든데 레드강라디 파 가수고리 슈총을 동야기 더시 판도스 카부부이나 카푸지진 상동토 그래서 것도 세상 년도 수에디 변 디센드 마수나 카시에지니 다 배선 답치시니 쉬워이나 배진 전주 그래서 것도
Now, with regard to our mind, therefore, well, due to different kind of afflictions that may arise in our mind, we can experience all sorts of problems. And when these different afflictions arise, well, due to particular causes and conditions, there's so many different types. Now, as to what to do with these different afflictions or afflictive emotions, well, there are different antidotes that we can apply to lessen or to reduce the different afflictions as they arise. But there are specifically at this time, at this day and age, there are certain mental states, negative mental states, that are a big problem, especially at this day and age. So, for example, depression, feeling discouraged, lacking the energy to do anything. That is a huge problem nowadays. Or fear and anxiety. That's another mental state that a lot of people, mental problem that a lot of people suffer from. Or having anger, being kind of aggressive or having anger. So some people feel some anger, and Rinpoche says, well, it shouldn't just say some people. Rinpoche said he himself struggles with getting angry. So this is a pervasive kind of problem, or these are negative states that a lot of people experience. And so what we need to understand is that these afflictive states of mind, we can actually transform them. We can change things around. We can make changes in such a way that we don't experience them. So that's possible. And Rinpoche repeated it a few times, that we can really make these changes.
가서 신체다 나다 라소베 다 남부도바다 녀모베 리디수 제디라 니부템베 카도딜라 상동야 상다 상lum만부 동주유명이 체버지 연구도 배자샤바이나 다 녀모빌루 칸데지인바 있는 딜라파 니부띠에 미수이나야 다 녀모빌루 칸데지인바 있는 슬라고르 배자샤나 지 되차다 시당다 안다다 신체다 디수제딜라 추유견다 메긴 참매기 판도 니부띠에기 타오지에 유바시 다 디장의 마세베 양 딜레 상의 마오다인데 배차샤나 남배雄시샤지에바이나 녀모빌루 디수제디 니부띠에기 상동야 마오 딜레 마오 용거리 지당의 추면경기 미지를 뒤뒤 상 딜레 마오 동야당 하고 망부시우치 용거리 가르스를 어디 가나 배나 뒤로 녀모빌루 디수제디 동인집에 가도라 동인집경기 강사 수수기 상리 나오라 뒤준도 준대기 상로 주단 대비 내수라 가수를 장바지진에 딜레 이치빌루 주요바다 야면의 준대기 꼴을 야부시기요바이나 하나 망주르 야 지 딜레 마워 레 준대기 꼴을 상동에 디야부요바이나 하나 망주르 다나신기 지원하시기 꼴을 상동에 야부지 가르 니버니버 순데 주에나 딜레 망주르 다양 지원하시 자마세비 데머시기 내수디로 등에 녀모레 중고요바 진짜기 두겐이다 고된다 랑디 tin데 데머시기 낭샤디 유바이나 디포네 상동에 배치만 주르 다양 디장의 마세비 가르서 그래다 상보 자치와 상주 이신빙기 상로 가다 냠베 상보 자치 무치야다 랑년 춘중지를 춘중제의 미지 내수로 그래서 랑년 춘중지를 때 인전스 잠블이 지된다 로신진 탄제기 된다 세대 할레비 친구를 따투에기 상보 자친구 진짜기 당제샤투지 그것이 딜레마도 그래서 저종 백그라운드로 베이징미라미라기 상동의 자치 좀 세워진 거 디조들이 다리 쉬고에 민도시나 근데 요래세 디디 카슈다 근데 도세 장이 다디 디조学 말에
Now, when it comes to the different afflictive kind of minds, the afflictive emotions, well, we can apply different types of antidotes. So there are different ways of thinking here, or different ways by which we can reduce or overcome these afflictions. Now, whatever the afflictive minds are, or the harmful minds are, such as attachment and anger, or even fear and depression, etc. Well, there are certain methods that can be applied no matter whether you follow any type of Dharma practice, any kind of religious practice or not, kind of general techniques that we can apply. But then if someone follows the Buddhist kind of descriptions, or as a Buddhist practitioner, well, there are even more possibilities when it comes to reducing, lessening, or even overcoming our afflictions. So there's so many different methods that are described. So to face, first of all, the afflictive emotion, and then to apply also the understanding of cause and effect. So once we get a better understanding of the law of cause and effect, we can more effectively reduce the afflictions. And if we widen our understanding of the law of cause and effect, and we include the law of karma, then we can widen it even further. And then, of course, if we include also in our reflection the fact, well, past and future life. So when we reflect on that, we can even more effectively address our afflictive emotions, apply the antidotes, etc. Or with regard to the Four Noble Truth. So to become aware, or to understand where suffering and happiness come from, what is the nature of existence, then the cessation and the path, and so forth. So based on these concepts, we can make great changes, or even more extensively if we apply, if we generate the mind of enlightenment, for instance. So instead of this very narrow-minded self-centeredness that we're usually controlled by, well, to move away from that and focus on the benefit of all sentient beings, include all sentient beings, work towards the benefit of all sentient beings. That is such an expansive mind, and so different from our self-centered, narrow-minded attitude. So all this can serve as a type of background here, a background knowledge that can help us a lot, that can help us to effectively apply the different methods, the different antidotes, and reduce our afflictions and even overcome them. But there's no need to talk about all this here. This was not the main topic Rinpoche wants to talk about today, but to just give you this background, to just give you that understanding that there are all these different methods by way we can train our mind, or we can deepen our understanding and utilize it then to address our different afflictions.
단돈배 개치슈지리 성모 동번이 쏘는 것도 다 동번이过了 로용 야부지 고 강나 강상 지유 무슨 차원이나 다티베 너무 맨니부티야 아 심바 투야로서 디줄을 님부티야 기타 가서 오다 내점민지 수르지 다 나사 용주 자야기 비지유인다 디 할래버지로 디수르지.
But one of the most important topics that is explained in the Buddhist scriptures is the topic of emptiness. So for someone who studies emptiness, who gains an understanding of emptiness and is now able to apply it effectively, well, it becomes like a medicine to all diseases. So it's like this incredible technique, in that if you realize emptiness, well, and utilize that mind in the right way, then that can serve as an antidote to all afflictions, which is why it is described as a medicine that cures all diseases, all illnesses.
好像有杂音，是不是有人没有关麦克风？可以看一下是哪一位吗？
隔了去干什么的？上掉了吗？但学弟的，他今天讲了，他上轮上路了，俺大当马几位亲不的，现在亲不那边看多了，看电视机5度时间老的讲了，他变得俺了掐算没赢的，俺让了掐算没赢呢，你东你去占你空了。 zani kumula yinba yina da bu chunyo ne 시당 춘주 걸어도 차상게 팅금이도 다 중요네 라마레스에 잡아 수시하러 시당 라미 미유디 간라 다 디네 초 야부 순서 샤다 다 뒤서 딘주 제시시네 상말로 다 잔지버 야부 중디 간라 세나 신지 강연 휴진부지 하는 레뉴요 말에 레뉴민도 다이나 강연 춘주지 가르스나 딘설로 유디강라 gembal로 유디강라 주제 된데 땅미 몸부지를 다세 된데 땅 주제 치고로 아니 길루 주제 길루비 주제 된데 친구 된데 치고디강라 티카도디라 센테스는 도스도스 다 딘딘 레요레 다 딘데 자마도 시부지 센나로라디 레뉴미도 나다 친구다 마지베 친구다 딘데 레뉴 딘디강라 참말로베 디디야지 가서 상도 마송 도지 당시시네 강에 체외인데 난다메지 알라 상 동주의 상상술의 센의 레드의 연구도 디 연구도 디 연구도 디 문에 단에 입에 디레 가서 그래 문에 이 강에 침부지 체외이나 동리 제도의 문에 이 뉴버디 레버지 차된 도에서는 디레 의미도 가레스로 어디 간다你东你去占那个论据了，在变得你阿香，是吧？在的牛西西吧，是吧？现在地卡多了，但我呢，在山上路了，生产些的马基不些的卡出去，修进步累具不的是你错脱也是这种事的，米其上路了，生产期许是那的，马基不期许，马地不期许的他，个什么也假的，说的是弄也假的，说的地。刚才山上路了，刚刚汽水的，他地讲，你到你去占那个论据了，是你穷不着，那是你在上东关系。
So what Rinpoche would like to address today is more about, well, how do we face our different fears, our different worries, more in general terms. So Rinpoche says, well, I give you the example of myself. Before 2022, well, I don't really remember when I was very little, but I didn't really have any problems. I was recognized as a lama. I became a monk. And I didn't really have any mental problems. So I was admitted to a monastery. I joined a monastery as a monk. I did my education there. Yeah, of course, sometimes I had to take exams, so I was slightly worried about the exam, especially if when I had to debate in front of others. So I had some kind of worry when it came to that, or when I took the Gelug exam to take my Geshe degree. Sure, there was slight anxiety, but they were just little worries, they were just little anxieties, nothing major. So there was no fear, there was no unhappiness. I didn't really have any kind of trouble. There's nothing that really troubled me. So I felt very happy, and I didn't have to apply. And when there were little worries, I could apply some methods that helped me to overcome these worries. So in that way, yes, my life was very easy and straightforward. I had no real problems, and I wasn't also able to face real problems. I mean, I hadn't been exposed to any real difficulties, and so it would have been really difficult for me prior to 2022 to, if something major had happened, to face it effectively. But then at the end of 2022, my uncle, who was Rinpoche's caretaker for many years, who took him from Tibet. So his uncle got sick. He got very, very sick. And so suddenly, for the first time, Rinpoche says he was so worried. He experienced such great unhappiness. And in his entire life, this has been the most difficult time, the worry about his uncle, about him. So basically, his mind was like the energy winds raised his mind in such a, it sounds like uplifted his mind, which is different. It has a different meaning. It's not like uplifted his mind, but his mind was so worried, it couldn't calm down. It couldn't kind of become.
在地地讲了，我呢
Sorry,
给他
I'll
什么
continue later.
다 심바 추스러네 러 추여서래 심바 마지바다 다 딜레디기도 아 신체지 다 가르쳐용 상강다당 신체의 딜레디지 다양 대지 상동디 간의 지 동포유에서는 심바 마도 다 상동에게 낭된딩에 가르당버디 남버스도 슈기 지라 다 뒷당디 간의 마지 심바 마 솔레 차투유에서는 이나야 생기 딩딩딜라 디 생기 강에 디만도 야보지 가속을 동네 시부지 야보지 세다 뎀바스너데 시 베베드 자메 동토에디 용금해버다 가레스러 디간라 신다 주지기 다리 주지 된제 지네 아샹기 뉴시티 포하기다 나사 겐세기 나사딘 바고레 다 디네 손디 뒤주 동도 드리다 니마 디네 손디 니마 지니 나로라 아니 디지도 칼라라 좋으면 차도 신대 가수요 칼라 디삼공 시작도 kinza 칼라 사나 만동이 지지 아니 사디가니 사마통이 지야 지 마자지 이름들이 주고도 수부디 차임도 안 때지 칼라 데스 카칸수리스 디도스 핑도 저 텐데시시네 굿딘데 소용고도 아니 코에디 뇽주고도 아니 가래 뭐 있네 디둥고도 힘부메버지 다 추면도 세습니다 가 사마로 벨지 동바순지 동디기도 로금이 가리 미게지시베이나 조명이지 에 미기잘라지 지제나 제베이나 조명이지 센나로 사마도스다 간데샤용 상간다순지 디리샤 디진제진에 신의 주백이 다리 주제네 하고 그래 신의 주지기 집어질을 딜리를 민주제가 침버리다 신의 주지기 단조라 다른 이슈 자주자뒤 도지임의 나랑기 딜리 맥스 호스피털 따지치버래 수부지고 가수도 따드가라 나오지 스티나로라 수부 잠 디로 길로 주담바 마차샤 주지 뒤에 tundu지 나온다 디가 센나로 가수 디여버디 다세부 된 거래 상도
你好像给阿香拿把的金大主机打里主机哈国对不对？
마 근데 주백이
金大
다리
主被
중지
打里主
10月18号
就给哈国，
So therefore, Rinpoche says, well, at the end of 2022, with the disease of his, or with the sickness of the illness of his uncle, he experienced the greatest kind of problems. So a lot of worries. He had a lot of worries at the time, and he had to really apply the Dharma and apply the different methods. And Rinpoche says he will talk about the methods he applied. Which kind of helped him to a certain degree, was manageable, his worries and so forth. He could keep them, he was able to keep them under control. Of course, deep within, there was still this worry. But anyway, it was in October, first Rinpoche said November, but actually in October 18th, it was his uncle was diagnosed. He was diagnosed with stomach cancer. And it was within 12 days after that the symptoms of his disease manifested very strongly, in that he couldn't eat. He could no longer eat. He had no longer any appetite. And even when he ate, he just couldn't do it. It's just that the food didn't really go down. So his body was really weak. It weakened a lot, and he couldn't sleep. He was unable to sleep. And so there was also a sense that there was a sense of like life has no longer any meaning. Life is empty. There's the taste of life, the joy of life is kind of lost. And there was a lot of fear, a lot of unhappiness and fear because of this incredibly dangerous disease. So anyway, having been diagnosed, his uncle got diagnosed. He was his main caretaker. I'm just adding this for people to know, since he was very little. So he was diagnosed. His uncle was diagnosed on the 18th of October, and then in November, around the 22nd of November, then he was taken to Max Hospital, and so in order to receive treatment. And during that time, it's just about a month from the time he was diagnosed until he was admitted to Max Hospital in Delhi, his uncle lost 10 kilos. Oh, this part I couldn't understand. But anyway, so he lost all his appetite, and it was really obvious how serious the disease was. It became so obvious just from the external appearance of his uncle having lost so much weight, having lost appetite, having lost his sleep, and so forth. So he was really seriously sick. The symptoms had become very obvious now. So during that time.
하디 지지는 넘버 2 바양 딘데기 냥냥 망부 유지리스 지지는 알레 망부 딘데 유지리스
Actually, probably many of you have had such an experience, such a negative experience with the disease and the death of a loved one. So probably you had more problems than I experienced.
강에 치유디 저 카슈디 저버 가워디다 지디 중송스 니동 니슈자니기 룬주의 중송스
Anyway, this was the most unbearable suffering. This was the worst suffering I ever experienced, the most unbearable problem that I experienced that felt unbearable for me. So that was at the end of 2022.
그 뒤지 생이 나로 초신다 지디 중송스 계싱아去了江北面巴当다去된다 가는 면스네야다 부친종의 겸벌을 되는 미스고랑去당 저와 차지 주장디 거래 근데제 송주망 부슈버래 근데기 진진에 지 비제 나로의 송배 된다도 또지 상당야 디 매바이나 그디디 에 수수수 가서 추토해야 돼 근데 용사 말해서 가르치는 수영부 대고 그래서 유진 통통 투에서 디 주진디这在逆图我们都是其实西部去偏松上上但样被家庭错的些家庭被去世的被家庭情况的错修行不来个都是
So anyway, if Rinpoche hadn't studied the Dharma, hadn't reflected on the Dharma the way he's done, so Rinpoche, since he was very little, he was in a monastery, he had access to the Dharma, he studied it in great detail and reflected on it. So that really helped him so incredibly, because if he hadn't had that, if he didn't have that very difficult time, if he didn't have the Dharma to think about, to reflect on and apply it, help him to reduce his worries, well, he probably would have felt, what's the use to stay alive? What's the point of all this? What's the use? So he would have despaired, in other words. And Rinpoche feels the Dharma has been so kind. The Dharma has been so kind to him, because here he found great solace. He found a lot of solutions to his worries, to all these problems, by thinking about what he'd learned, by applying the Dharma.
상동야디다 아샹기 체도 세나로를 마지바트 센데 친구 용야디 마쇼 준종 제 체도 상을 가르담바인 슈베이나
Now, with regard to his Rinpoche's unhappiness, being so worrying so much about his uncle, well, in order to reduce that unhappiness, that worry, what were the methods that he applied? Well, the methods were the following. So Rinpoche will now share with you what kind of methods he applied to reduce his unhappiness. The first thought Rinpoche had was, well, this is reality. It is what it is. I cannot change it. His uncle has become sick. The sickness has manifested. There's nothing I can do. So now his uncle got sick. What is the next thing to do? Of course, have him treated. Go for treatment. But besides having his uncle giving him the medical treatment he needs, what else can I do?
민바 만보를 계제티지니 미주기 타만 가를 유바 내가 차상지고 가서 주요버스너리 하고 지지지 저 타만 가를 유메디 제주당에 디 뭐 당부 디레샤스니 제투고에디.
So basically, first of all, of course, it's important that his uncle get treated. So what is it that Rinpoche himself can do? Well, Rinpoche felt it was most important to become familiar with all the different methods, all the different ways in which this disease can be tackled. So what kind of treatments are available? So to talk to the doctors, talk to the physicians, and get a good understanding of what can be done in the situation of his uncle.
수수무인의 아샹기 체도 수수랑이 아샹기 체도 제토고야의 제토바디 가르렌도스니 디상 코송 디땅 가서 그래 디상 땅고도 디땅바이스.
And then secondly, besides getting him the kind of treatment he needs, also what else can I most effectively do for my uncle? What is it that I can directly do to benefit him? That was the second thought Rinpoche had.
제와 같이 주여바다 부시 같이 주여바 디파 아샹 자를 땡투고에디.
So the second step was to show his uncle how much he cared, how much he loved him, and how much he had respect for his uncle. So he felt that was the time to show him his love and respect for his uncle, who had been his caretaker since he was very, very young.
마세비 수수문의 제토의 지디 다 아샹기 치를 되네 간들 아샹기 상류 나로라 오다 쿠나라 단 긴쿠르도 마송나 자자 자담바 랑도 상비 이切디당 아샹기 상류 나로라 딜레 퇴시 가서 그래 간한다 드나치다 쿠기 자자 자 참만 gen키니 지도 상비 루샤사 요버지 수도고에 디 차디샤스.
So that was really beneficial because what it did to his uncle understood that Rinpoche was there for him 100%, that Rinpoche supported him, did whatever he could. So he had faith that Rinpoche was there for him, that he supported him. In that way, it gave him a lot of happiness, just knowing that Rinpoche did whatever he could to be there for his uncle. So just having that care and having that respect and so forth was very beneficial for his uncle.
아샹 경우에네 아샹 코랑 이 세나로라 고야 조우디 카르레스 뇌바 조우디 카르레스 이상담이.
Also what Rinpoche considered was, what does his uncle need the most in terms of his mental state? What does his uncle's mind really need? So Rinpoche gave a lot of thoughts to what is most important for his uncle's state. Of course, his uncle wanted to get better. His main hope was that he would recover. That was his main hope.
아샹기 레오디 나 야부차야디 코레오 조우디 디 레오 조우디 인디간라 딜랭에 지구르 제마토나 딜랭에 송저당 가서 그래 지송로 디 야부지 도마토나 더 상류 나로라 저요의 지부디 핑이면도 된다 오면 돈에 아샹기 레오 조우디 토라당도 세상 계승아 신대지부제 가르소 그래 아샹기 레오딜nga 야야 로야 로去다 가서 그래去로종제야 당 디수데데 야야 로 디레오조들이 디강라 쇼저지지 디야부 수마도지 신제지지니 마지베지니 수수수기 마 괴주베이나 아샹기 레오조디 토라당야디 차기도스.
Now, what was his uncle's main kind of hope? Main kind of hope was to get better. So Rinpoche said it was important to respect that, to consider that important, that this was his uncle's hope, and to not act in a way that contradicted that hope. So it felt very important for Rinpoche to not, to make sure that he doesn't lose this hope. because in his uncle's mind, it was important for him to get better because he has great hope that Rinpoche, that he can continue to look after Rinpoche, that Rinpoche will be successful in his life and so forth. So in that sense, his uncle wanted to get better to be able to support Rinpoche, and Rinpoche felt it was very important to support this. I mean, to not in any way contribute to his uncle's losing hope. So he wanted to kind of support this and give him hope that he would get better. He felt that was important. Rinpoche felt that was important to do, to not kind of, as Rinpoche puts it, disappoint his hopes or expectations, or not let him lose his hope.
阿香的东西真的是破操的，他的破被讲了，热我假设说的，大家说的，我说的，在做基本上的常用的讲了，我呀，嘛贵说呢，是吧？刚才经常从这几年，西维基地，他就不恰，他呀那啥没些的那些都不恰说呢。短到我们土呢，第二项了六百节的基本下个都是六节的基本，干的是呢，二项了六十就越别讲了，但六十就越别土呢，可能的是我他妈从上路下是做的俺的，俺也蛮卡说的，属于上路雇养不家境不大嘛，多些些呢，蛮多是贵吧人呢，但第二项你土的讲了，第呢二项个是我他们那个的是，但二项个哪啥柴了，你继续的我第一节个都是。
So also another thing that became really important was, well, since my uncle was so sick, so on top of that, if I had now become really unhappy and depressed, and due to all my depression and unhappiness, I would have gotten sick, that would have harmed my uncle the most. That would have been the worst, because Rinpoche, well, mine means Rinpoche. So Rinpoche's well-being has always been most important to his uncle, who raised him like a parent. So it has always been most important. If, as a result of his uncle's disease, Rinpoche had gotten sick with worry, his uncle would have lost all hope and would have really despaired. So it was very important, Rinpoche felt, it was very important that he did not become sick. He did not despair because of his uncle's disease, so that he doesn't harm his uncle in that way. He would have greatly harmed his uncle, and he tried whatever he could to not harm his uncle in that way. So to not himself get sick because of all this worry, because of all this unhappiness.
Yes.
电影的讲了，数岁我呢，阿香个切头过来的，拉lin个托呢，加热托呢我是切，大拿先个的美剧个切过来的说啥嘛，切头把的切上切，我的第张，阿香了拼图继续的我的这下是，数岁我呢阿香个切头也学了，那就短音了，给这些音了，小学音了嘞。数不大单音那里，写了표현那里，제 수중원의 제토구에 차상하지 민주 가르 제구 뒤수디 다다다다지 뒤주 다다다다지 뒤 제토구에 차상하지 엔 디토네 수수 심바 별로지 구양부지지네 수구 디당지 대디 다 아샹의 핀도 치슈디 어디 차고도 당의 핀도 치슈디 제구를 왜 아샹의 녀버 제구를 했으나 다 상륜의 녀버 제디 요 말디 내가 제단지 돈이 수수기 자주기 돈이 아상로 뉴버제기 차송의 있나 이 된기 뉴버제의 기본지장 차로도 우스 디상로 코송 상당.
So therefore, really, what is most important is to do whatever Rinpoche felt. It's to do whatever is best for his uncle, in terms of course, getting him all the treatment that his uncle needed, but also to put his uncle's mind at rest. So in terms of Rinpoche's facial expressions, for instance, so to make sure that his expressions, his demeanor was in such a way that it didn't upset his uncle, to assist him in whichever way was possible, to give him massages when he was in pain, to give him food, to cook for him and so forth, to do whatever he could to make his uncle happy and relaxed, or to put him at ease, to help him in the best way possibly, physically and mentally. Now, of course, in such a situation, it's impossible to really have the motivation to harm someone like his uncle who was so sick. But if we're not skillful, if we don't act in a skillful way and don't give a lot of thought, what is the best I can do for that person, for their mental state, their physical state, what is the best I can do? Without considering all this, we may unintentionally actually harm a person. So Rinpoche thought that was important to consider. It was important to not do anything that would be upsetting for his uncle. And he gave a lot of thought to be sure he did the right thing in that situation, to be of the greatest benefit to his uncle. So to not harm him on top of all the disease and all the different problems and symptoms he experienced.
디 강라 상당디 상로 신다 된데 가르기 핀도 종수위나 어떤 잠블린 디 나로로 유데비 미차상라 수수라 신다 니슈유베 미지 메바 미시바리 다 잠블린 디 나로로 유베 다 미동나 디수 제디 차상 수수기 제어여서 신다 니슈유 긴기 미디 야나 파슈디 내라치 야나 수슈디 내라 다 가서 중주에 디 잠블리 나로라 다 하나 미참을 용거스 러버이너리 디 용디 거다 쇼 가사간이 디 용디 거레스.
Well, there's another thought or another way of thinking that Rinpoche felt that was really beneficial in these circumstances. Well, the fact that everyone has loved ones, everyone has very close relationships with certain people that other people don't have a close relationship to. So that's just the way of the world. And of these loved ones, of these people that we're so close to, well, one of us will go first. Either we die before them or they die before us.
수수생기 나로라 라마 자와세의 제발로 수어다야스네 아샹기 체도 야 수어더니 게시 공주기 라마 공주기 투지 신력이 진시 아샹기 나서 자토에 순르지 여버이나 수수기 수어던 디여버이나 다디 여버디 수수 제구디간라 양 디양치 공주를 수어 가서 그래 아샹기 나서 자야다 아샹기 준비 잠블리 네바 다 민간 나로라 네바 냥타바 다 아샹 레장 냥타바 할레바 다 미기 따와상 미토에 된제 수고 강에네 되는 마부도 저 군수 다 가서 그래 상야 미우了주지지네 아니 가서 그래 라마 공주 송다 수어더야다 아니 뒤준 배상 나서 자야기 뒤준 배상 지야다 양 디마인베 가서 그러다 다 포하기 냥니스라고 그래 포하기 미바지에스 낭시 야 다배신도 바야기 된대기 포하 냥니 지에로서 디수지디간 디수양 핑구도 세나 로부베 차고도
이런 포화 지단 간절지 그냥 다긴
포스나 낭시
제수
다배신 강을 야 바야 주어로
그냥 소소 그냥기 소소 텐지상로 당리베 아샹
아니 말해 아샹다 네번 자다술은 미니
Now, also something else. So Rinpoche said that that was something to consider, just the fact that at some point one of us dies, but then also to engage in certain practices. So supplicate, for instance, the Lama and the Three Jewels, to pray towards the Lama, the Three Jewels, for if there's a possibility of recovery, that they may assist his uncle to recover, but also to think of all other sick people in this world, to think that there are so many people in hospitals, in dire, experiencing incredible problems, in experiencing a lot of pain and disease that is a lot worse than his uncle. So to also become aware of that, and then do certain prayers, do prayers for the sick that help the sick, and also do the practice of poa, which is the kind of preparatory practice that you do before someone passes away, where you through a meditation make sure that the consciousness leaves through the crown of their head and is led to a pure realm. So to do this kind of practice, Rinpoche engaged in that kind of practice, focusing on his uncle, but also focusing on all other sick people. So to perform this very profound practice for the benefit of his uncle and other ill people.
하시기 상동단디 야부여가 있는 핀도 연구도 세디 배는 니카도 순저실 상당디 더 지원하시기 상류디 미치치스나 하장이 통동시 미치 장년 대보요 지워 장년 대보 디나로 차세 춘유지리 더 신딜러 카트에버디 스르딘도 카트에버디 총 말에 그 네거지 루카시지 카트에 순저실 양 네, 치러 양양제기 그거 벤 다베신 다블었는데 기 가수그래 이 제토야다 디 그거디 유여버치 다 제왕하시기 상도 돈이 아니 이 다신의 지역이 상인데 돈이 당디 어디 디양지 가수그래 세나 저와 세버치 디기도디
And not just that, like, what we can also consider is reincarnation. To think of the fact that, well, there are past and future lives, so that there's not just this life. Well, actually, in comparison or in relation to all the countless lives that we've had and that we are going to have, well, in relation to that, this life is so short. So that we meet, that we are with someone in this life, that we will also meet again. That there's a possibility for the person who dies to be born in the pure realm, to be born in a better kind of state. So there are all these different thoughts of like letting go, basically understanding the person who's going to go, but also understand this life is so short and we can meet again, and there's the hope of that person to have even a better situation in their future life.
미율의 폐시신에 다 가속으로 용 주말린 뒤로 용 주말 함세네 마 점버마 충무지신에 하나 눈다 지지 뭐이다 근데 지라 용 샤바로 용 공부做거래 아니 다 나신기 지선 밀러레버다고 지금 차춘버이나 아니 공부 춘중에 취장가 다 투장가 된데 당시 표시 되니 수용네 더 추지 배 투야순이지마도 다 롱바지나 배 타니우지신 파스 온데지 인데지 정보를마도 미치고나 다 디네 손데 잔 투요 말이 다 지단이 친구다고지 차선보이는 공로 주주주되는 하살을 페네 아니 디네 손디 용전 투요 말이 마페 지진이 공로宣别跟 이름지 공로 宣别跟你 아마가 샤바로 그래서 딘데 상당되가라야 가수리 등에 딘데기 등에 수수지부 가나 수수지부기 용의여버디 멤버 간다지 코요 춘이스는 지딩기 춘이 이거지
So if you think of the Buddha, for instance, as an example, so Buddha Shakyamuni, he was born as a human being, and just after his mother, Mahadevi, she gave birth to him. Well, Rinpoche says that he thought it was within a week that she passed away. So within the time of a week, she passed away. So the Buddha never really had time with his mother. Or, for instance, Milarepa, when he was quite young, he took off to study black magic, And when he got back, he had only very little time to spend with his mother, as another example. So he was then separated from his mother. And also Lama Tsongkhapa, when Lama Tsongkhapa was about 16 or 17 years old, he left his hometown or his home village to go to central Tibet. And his mother passed away before he met her again when Lama Tsongkhapa was still quite young. So in that way, losing a loved one is not something that only happens to us. This is just the way of the world. This is the nature of cyclic existence, that losing a loved one is kind of part of living in samsara, having this kind of samsaric life.
편 치슈지라고 그러게. 누가 편 치슈스는지 가르토네. 나 이상 배나 나도 밀을 지어 랑버리다. 밀을 지어 랑치지네. 다 나도 미치지 되리고라. 다 밀을 지어 랑베 구이ren 니부디 가르이스. 로 미기 만화순 조미 人类人的미기 미치기 님부디 가르이스. 디산다. 디산다한테 간다 수수 민지기 님부디 가드이나 아샹도 냥도 데디 냥도 데트웨디 민지기 님부레베 디장 님부레베 디 민지기 님부디 말해 저 냥도 데 중바이나 뺏겨 상보래 야보래 이네 미지기 자산 냥도 데세 요 말해 디 매바 이네 인rum부 냥도 데 중바이나야 야보래 저 레디 디 미지기 님부 조우드레베스는 아주 수영부 대구에기 님부 조우드레베스나 디자니 말어.
So, well, all this Rinpoche considered, but one thought that was most beneficial was the following. So Rinpoche explained that having been born human, so Rinpoche was born human. So what is the purpose of our own human life? To reflect on this. What is the purpose for me being here? Why was I born to be a human being? What is the meaning of life, basically? This is something we need to consider, we need to reflect on. So Rinpoche said the meaning of his life, the essence of his life, was not to always be around his uncle. Of course, being with his uncle, he felt very fortunate to have had the time or the chance to spend a lot of time with his uncle. But that is not what life is all about, to just be with this one person. Of course, if Rinpoche had been able to stay with this uncle for a long time, it would have been wonderful. But
니간다 수수 신주 땡기 더 싫어당 전바당 띵인생로 수비 남기原定 디수예제 동야 디장的마스 수수 선버디 전的덴버시에 수수 선버디了价值로 value 수수 선버디了人당 요버시에 가르스는 수수 선버디기 같이 투도기 지미 감나지라 미비된시네 랑 양다발이야 지에 디 지당기 미지 디나니 저도 좀 디나니 추바 가서 디나니 추바스라고 그래 추바지 추베 나니 저도 좀 진짜지기다 여러 젠반상责任 차도 법이 랭긴 된다디 어디 차도 없어.
yes. So therefore, Rinpoche said that's not why he's here, just to be around his uncle. So what is the meaning of life? Why are we here? How can we make our life meaningful? Well, in terms of mental qualities, it's important to develop wisdom, to develop mindfulness, to develop concentration. So to develop these type of mental qualities, they're all important. But what is the actual value of life, the meaning of life, or the value of life? So, well, the meaning of life, the value of, or the life becomes valuable if we use our life or use the time while we're alive to benefit sentient beings, to benefit sentient beings by taking them, by leading them onto the right path. So On top of that, well, being a Dharma practitioner, and not just being a Dharma practitioner, being also an ordained person, there's so much we can do. On top of that, that was also his uncle's main hope, that Rinpoche would do all this, be a practitioner and so forth.
아샹기 리오조디 루토베이나 다 아샹 수염바 레장 코랑 수염바당 코랑기 리오제 니구디 리오 나로는 디용구도 상비 시부지 개침부지에디 루토베이나 수염바 레장 개치와 수염부 데바 레장 개치와 작도 다디
So maybe Rinpoche's uncle, so his uncle was reborn in one of the Buddha fields, in the pure realms of a Buddha. Now that is great. But what was most, that would have been great if that happened, but what was most important, that he fulfilled his uncle's hope that Rinpoche will be able to benefit other sentient beings, leading them onto the right path and so forth. That would have been more important, or that is more important even than his brother staying alive.
디수상당디간라 땡디 지핑구도 다 디상도 마세베 다양 도쇼니 상당디간라 가르치네가 다 가소리 다 주진나출기 왕기 주다 진나출 종지진은 제부인고리 도도요 말에 나사디 뉴시디 용바레 다 뉴시디 용사비지라 미주제로 소버틴데기 제주여버 디수제디 제야 디장마도 딜레 게네 간에 제주요 말에 다 디장마도 딜레 게네 신투지 스모마지버 차야디 가르왕 간데스 용고래 상당디 디 나랑기 생기 나로라 아샹르 지워세 지워 제디 이네 지워디 되샤던 집이 지워지 디 인자니 되샤 지색이 유디 라쇼메요 상안자레디 되샤 유장 되샤던 집이 지워 인자 디왕기데 유샤스.
So therefore, Rinpoche says it's actually most important that he acts according to his uncle's wishes. That would have been more important for his uncle than his uncle to stay alive. Anyway, so to also something else that Rinpoche felt was important to consider was to think about cause and effect. So there's certain causes that gave rise to his uncle's disease. I mean, his uncle's disease is the result of many causes and conditions. So of course, it's important to receive treatment, to get his uncle the treatment that he needed. But there's not really much more that he could have done in the situation in terms of just addressing his uncle's illness. But the fact that his mind was unhappy, that Rinpoche's mind was unhappy, that he worried so much, that he was upset because of his uncle's disease, was not just because he loved his uncle. It was because his love was mixed with attachment. So having pure love for his uncle, if he had just pure love for his uncle, he wouldn't have worried. He wouldn't have felt as unhappy as Rinpoche did. So therefore, it's important to understand, it's important to become aware of the fact that our love for other people is mixed also with the afflictive emotion of attachment, because without attachment, worry in such a situation or in any other situation wouldn't have been possible. So that was the main cause for being so upset or being unhappy and worrying. The main cause was really the attachment Rinpoche felt.
되찬 집이 왕기 신체 레버마도 계신 되찬 집메베 토네 지워 장마디 임베이나 다 동에데 제루진의 지마롱 상베 다 딘데기 리와당 마상루디의 요레 디예베 토네 무예데 툼베 토시 제디 차상 제디 지기레 양답의 지워디 토네 디장마도 딜레게네 난다당 신앙다 마지벨레디 잔용고 말이스 디세브레샤 가레슬디간라 되차던 디용디간라 되차기 상디 간스나 수수 기빈단 되어요다. 저 나를 고두스 나 수염부 대야라 수수 수염부 대야기 대야당 가서 수염부 대네 수수기 기빈 줘봐라 아샹디 수수 기빈 줘야라 기빈 줘킹기 다 주주우지라 지치 수수의 기본 쟁이다. 다 수수를 배 이제 차상 제지시네 로봇 제용디가 된쟁이다 로봇이 할래비 다 뒤로 가서 그래. 디차인 거로 구구 침부시 소용 거로 디 통고로 이 전에 된데 차디 거로 이내 상류톤이 수수 기본 루에 당 수수 기본 디 도발라 메터 메비 주지를 통치시니 아니 랑된 루야 단 저 차디 도스 랑 나 간데 수그리 녜 된다 아시아면은 녜 된다 가르치 그랬어 나 가르치 녜 미스 간데 시에 그랬으시니 다 간다 수수 다 돈이 시에 보이나 수수기 된다 저 유디버치 뇌샤 상만 다랑
So attachment is such that without attachment, if there hadn't been attachment, if Rinpoche had only experienced if Rinpoche had only experienced love for his brother, for his uncle, the situation would have been very different. So it's very clear that all these worries, all this unhappiness came from Rinpoche's attachment. So if his love for his uncle had been free from attachment, he would have definitely have the thought, may my uncle get better, may his suffering be reduced, may his suffering disappear, and so forth, may he be free from suffering. And he would have done anything to help him, of course, in the same way. However, all his worry, Rinpoche's unhappiness, Rinpoche's fear, well, that wouldn't have arisen without attachment. That is very clear. And what is it about attachment? Well, attachment is responsible for us being concerned with our own benefit. So we're not just concerned with the other person. It's not just that we're concerned, we're worried about the other person's well-being. We're worried about our own well-being. So because Rinpoche's uncle benefited Rinpoche, we're worried about losing this benefit. So unless my uncle stays alive, Rinpoche felt I won't be able to reap this benefit of his presence. And so it's like this attachment was important, was responsible for Rinpoche's worries. So therefore, it's always mixed with self-centeredness, this attachment towards our own benefit, attachment to our own well-being. It's that kind of attachment that caused Rinpoche to be upset and to be in pain over his uncle's sickness and eventual death. And so it's really all to do with that. Like in my life, it's like what benefits me in my life? What is beneficial to me? And due to this attachment, therefore, when I can't get it, there's worry, there's fear, etc. So it all comes down to attachment to our own well-being, attachment to ourselves, and attachment to our own benefit, our personal well-being.
다 딘데 인디가라 가서 우리 수수기 미치디 야부차야당 수수기 미치디다 수수기 뇌반응신 수수기 진 뇌바다 미주어로 어디 지 도발라 디 도토야기 미치 지 수수기 뇌반응신기 딘데기 미치지 용야라 다 게치무시우지 통용디가라 다 딜러 센차지시네 디 딜류당토마 센나 디파샤토마 센데 디 류당마토지 수수 미치기 된다의 가르여버 있는 디제기 체도다 아샹로 수버 딘제기 튠베진디 수제디 개진부 통용디간라 다 디체도 다 마불라위는 수수 기빈 체도 디 기빈 로발라 핀도 유비 진디 수제디 진조디 수제디 류당토고마다 센네바 센기 류당토고마 다 대응문에 토네 고카 제기 말 써야 되고 유다 진기 왕견 두기로마도 생기 류다마토나야 가서 그렇고 뭐에 수긴 조디 만두어 지진 네 말에 생기 토네 딘조 당니 조디 통면 되봐 조 당니 마두어지 생기 생디를 수지진 류다마도 딘되샤래
So therefore, in our life, well, when it comes to the present life, for instance, so all our wishes, all our goals, well, wanting to accomplish them, this kind of wish, this kind of drive, it all comes from our attachment to ourselves and to our well-being. So we're unable to let go. We're unable to give up this personal benefit. There's this sense of like this our mind holding on to our personal benefit, being attached to our personal benefit without us being able to let go of it. So how do we benefit from this situation? What kind of good comes out of this for us? So this is like a constant kind of a companion. This thought, it's always with us. We're not able to let go of our own well-being. And of course, it's due to causes and conditions that we will be separated. We will not always get what we want. We will be separated from loved ones and so forth. There's really nothing we can do, but mentally we can't let go. We don't want certain changes. We keep holding on to, we keep attaching ourselves to certain situations, to certain people and so forth because of the strong attachment.
되샤기 강들 랑기 디오 두제기 주더 진 참말로 랑기 디오 두제기 유인버의 진인버 통화 참마 되샤기 딜류당 두고 말해 류당 생기 되샤기 생디기 생지지네 생네 발류 두고 말해 다 생네 만뢰버디 되는 투긴 줘라 기본 주요 말해 다 수수기 초장심 다 왜네 수계시 로 생기 되샤기 류당마토디 la 수상단에 디 생네 류당마토디기 cheba gen zhugu mendu. Ngoye nesu kurang la kante jin zhugu res. Ngoye nesu kurang kante shire la di kana ji kazu jibu yongya ki jujen changsu na jibu cha yungu re. Naya ki jujen zosu na yungu re. Na ne subu la ani kazu kon jowa chimbu tang re. Da na shengi nasa ha lebi shi jibu tinda yinba yina so chuya di yungu. Di chuni re. Di chuni re. Ma sebe susu ki 가서 그래. 디오 조제기 주진 디수 제디양 주둔 조에 여버디 그 춘이래. 디 뇌샤기 류당 투비 주진지 그 다음 뇌샤기 류당 마투버 딘낭신지 전라 딘데시 되기래서는 자네 데빙이버 요 말이. 디 인디간도 당부니 수수기 디제 조당디 디오 조당다 수수기 미유샤당다 레오자당다 디수 제디 싫어지 가서 그래 뒤에 토네 양답이 싫어지 제버집에 토네 디제 주당다 저샤당디 최대지 마샤버시니 되샤기希望도 주네 아니 상동다 디오는 주디간라 강에 체리레자스다.
Therefore, attachment is such that no matter what the circumstances, well, we are not able to let go. So when it comes to accomplishing, bringing about happiness, well-being, and so forth, we need to generate the causes and conditions. That is what brings us happiness. Our attachment is not going to help us to find the kind of happiness we're looking for. We need to generate the right kind of causes and conditions. So attachment is such, it's part of our mind, and our mind is unable to let go, therefore. So it doesn't really make any difference whether we have attachment or not. It's not responsible for our success. If you think about it, so in terms of reality, if you think about what is reality, well, no matter what the situation, whether it's fortunate circumstances that we experience, feeling happy, being well, and so forth, that is the result of certain causes and conditions. Getting sick, for instance, is the result of certain causes and conditions. So when we get sick, of course, our life may greatly change, which is all the result of certain causes and conditions. That's just the nature of things. That is reality. That's the nature of phenomena. So whether we have attachment or not, that is not going to change. And not just that, everything changes. Nothing remains the same. Everything changes. And again, the way things change is all dependent on certain causes and conditions. And our attachment just keeps us from letting go, from just going with the flow. In reality, we may be as attached as it gets. That will not change reality. It will not change the fact that to accomplish something, we need to create the causes and conditions to establish that. So therefore, to have happiness, to experience happiness, to get the goal or to reach the goal that we've been aiming for, it's important to apply wisdom, and a wisdom that analyzes the situation, that is a discerning type of wisdom. But without that, if we're just driven by our attachment, well, we won't be able to be more successful, or we won't be able to get what we want, even though it may seem that way. But in reality, what we need is actually a discerning kind of wisdom that understands what we need to do, what are the causes and conditions that we need to create to find the happiness we want.
Ngā sō sēngi nāng lō la kāngiān yōng yā dāng ngāng rā dāng dōpa chīmbu tsē lē kē yu dōpa dā nā sēngi shūngba lē yā tsāma lō ki tsāwa ndā wā di gyōshā ki chī ki tū dā kā rē sī lō di gāng lā rō bēsēn chī shā bā yī na bē na 다 잘라지 요번에 가리는 지도 벤 되는 유디비티 가사 니친디 지비티 딜을 찾으나 계시 잘한 딜러 신자 매워 있는데 신자 세딘 되샤디 무시고 되샤디 가르스 로디간라 잘라디 지 양면의 딜이다 가서 랑기 디워당 랑기 디워 두지 순다 양면의 랑기 되어 주제기 주더 진 순르실로 통네 아니 셀레게 이동 왔다부지라 통로 뭐이네 술레 셀레게 이동 너디 뭐이네 술 자장가 마시면 주다부 통해 술 쓰고라다 셀레게 이동 왔을 어디가라 지 이동의 차마도 디 주행기 차대 잔이 많통해 진도샤기 세상 진대이 셀레게 이동 통네 아니 센티라 수지지네 센티라 가서 인자지지네 가디언의 딜류 담아 되지가 어디 수수의 종 수수 멤버이나 디수수의 종나 삼바다 다 가디언의 센의 코디 지지네 센나의 샤르지지네 잔이 봐 유마 되지로 생기 나니 봐 유마 되지 뭐에네서 유마 유디게지 가가르다 생기 봐 유마 되지 센나로 코르지 센디간라 쇼가부간라 나자 나부지 사바이는 고딘자르디로 고마도 어디 나신 되자기 비디오티 송고래. 그래서 근데지 신 이거는 소대디 신디 류당만 도서 어디를 거다. 신 류당스도 벽에 나도 시티베아부도 류 루스거다. 루이 미동와스거. 루이 당만 도서. 신기 바유만 도서 거마도 뭐에는 줄 잘라디 바유만 도 슬로이는 잘라디 수수 라버강의 요거마도 그 US 게임에 봐. 잘라 파슈 수수 US 뒤에들이 수수 라바나니 요 말이 US 게임 다 류 바유마도 류 바동마도 세나라 야르 냐지지네 생기 나로야 코디 지지네 배 인자지기 자원나신 야 인자디지 바 유마도 어디라 류담도 스타 녀샤스는 어딘데지라 녀샤스 요르다스
Therefore, all our mental problems, really. So when we think about the different types of problems, like mental problems we experience, being worried, feeling depressed, being upset, being unhappy, all the different types of unwanted mental experience as well, their root is attachment. So take the example of being attached to your TV. So without having attachment, we would be able to let go of this TV. So without attachment, we would just, create the causes and conditions that are necessary to have the objects we need, or to have the objects that bring us happiness. However, with attachment, what happens is when we observe an object such as this television, this TV set, for instance, well, in that moment, we're no longer able to see things as they are. So, of course, there are certain positive qualities of this TV, but our mind exaggerates these positive qualities. Our mind sees this particular object as 100% positive. We're no longer able to reflect upon the disadvantages of having a TV, for instance, or of this TV. It's just our mind is totally obsessed with this positive aspect. We can't see anything negative. And our mind, therefore, because we see the object in such an exaggerated way as completely positive, our mind holds on to the object, is not able to let go. We constantly think about the object, depending on what it is. We constantly think about it, and again, Rinpoche says we're not able to let go. We obsess over this object, and that kind of obsession, that kind of attachment, is very difficult to remove from the mind. It's like pouring oil over a piece of paper onto a piece of paper. So to remove the oil from the paper, just as difficult as that, it is very difficult. In the same way, it's so difficult to remove attachment from our mind. Now, there's this Tibetan expression which translates into English, letting go. Here, letting go, what are we supposed to let go of? It's not the object. It's not letting go of the object. It's letting go of the mind that is attached. So really what we should let go of is our mind not being able to be without this object or holding on to this object.
这个绿大马图的新下的原因呢，这位第一切都新车的用过，安扎用过，大拿新多巴用过，大拿新样地等之呢，说第一渐渐的熊巴样用有，看这是了就讲了，变呢，他第了绿大马图的原的讲了，绿大马图这位第一切都。新车看这是用过的是呢，第没现在这第喇叭穷的讲，第出了大没有，这节没有，你节没有，没压入去了不？那样，他说的，这亚马推去，但常常的，我是有逐步定的亚对讲面试了马拖去，现在亚马拖去，定的用的多，看意思呢，贵亚呢起劲不赢呢，你的出了大没有，你的他说的，俺们了嘛，都是钱没有，都是大没有上，定这个新车的用过了，对，但。디단 디네 나다 용시버 다디 가르치 용스로 다디 ku지 내가 칠르네 내가 캄베 내가 딘데 지디온 디간에 마치 사니 디자미요 세스네 딘데기 다 나다스로 그래 또 나다기 자군다고 수르지 레디기도 디 가르치 용세스네 디 제버 있는 비싸버래 세스네 딘데 다 시부지 딜러 자신부 지디 여버 있는 거다 나다 치중세디 나다디 강러 디네 용야기 뇌자 슈슈중기 지기도 무부딜의 지장기 뇌자 휴지의 요인은 디체도 생제의 휴지의 거래. 무부딜의 뇌자의 지장기 휴지의 요인은 디체도 난자디 디체지 휴지의 거래. 现在大拿新的他熊不来是了，你讲了呀，叔叔给家了新家，我不地了新家都是有的讲了，但地了新家有不的讲了。但地的日tun被加拉现代的地嘞要等这些列的讲哦，但看是那加拉等这个等地大被加拉日地的新加有嘞，因为啊地嘞要的嘞，俺地多多嘛嘞上边咯，地叔叔的你不都古语呗，等这个叔叔个生年的绿大嘛，对不？你不都古语等这个新加有吧？这个托呢，哎你打。돈이 토야 되면도 돈이 구도 아니 디바로 딜 shum바 딜레 용거라스 딘데진 레고레 상고도
So therefore, when it comes to not being able to let go, it's kind of like our mind is glued to the object. It's kind of like a glue. So therefore, letting go really means to let go of our obsession with this object. And if we're not able to let go, well, that's when fear and worry and so forth arise. So that's fear and, of course, suspicion and eventually even unhappiness and depression even not getting what we want. So, for instance, we're not able to let go. If taking the TV as an example again, if we're really attached to this television, well, if someone touches it, we don't really want them to touch it. We don't want to lend the television to someone. We don't want to borrow it to someone. So we can't say no. Maybe we can't say no, but the whole time we're like worried that they won't return it in the same condition that we lend it to them, that we break it. So there's all this worry. That's all this worry that may arise. And that all has to do with our attachment. So, for instance, if there's like a building going on in the room where the television is positioned, so then we worry that someone breaks it. That all this has to do with attachment. Without attachment, there wouldn't be any worry. And so that then, of course, also gives rise to fear. So it's the measure of our attachment accounts for the measure of our fear. So there's this close relationship. The stronger our attachment, the stronger our fear. And not just that, then on top of that, with regard to, so first of all, fear and worry of losing the object or of the object breaking, of somehow no longer having the object in such a way that it fully functions and so forth, looks a certain way, etc. But then also, how do we get depressed? How do we feel unhappy? Well, this is also in accordance with how our attachment works, how it affects our mind, so that it accords with our attachment in the sense that our mind is unable to let go, and therefore, if we lose the object, if we don't get what we want, then there's the sense of despair. There's the sense of feeling unhappy about it, being depressed. Therefore, it makes total sense. It makes total sense that all these unhappy, all these negative, unwanted states of mind, such as worry, such as superstition, such as unhappiness, and so forth, that they all come from attachment. That attachment is kind of the root of all these.
Ngui nesu chewa ina tindegi sinche dan damda tinde chede wale chi cheme ini cheme yase chede wale ro tindegi sinna chede di pasho ki TV di moteni yabu nyela kanya pingo kanya cheba ndugo ma cheba nguma di karu ndugo warsana te kesi ro TV di nyebar tu susu la guye ke chimichi yinba ina di sungche che di gangla janda chi go shanare kari chi karu chula mandwe chi jachwe ki tun chi che shana dadi yashwe re di 이 자주의 돈이 뭐 카웨 라요기 가서 휴진 진야당 편년 진야기 주진이 어디다 자주들이 생이 나로라디 진고지 마부시데디 TV 송제 제투 말디 제투 말에 딜레 두디 수수기 심벌 투투디 심벌 나사 수자다 디 진고지 마부시에서디 심벌 나사다.
Now, in reality, if we obsess over the object of attachment, it doesn't help in any way. It doesn't help us to protect the object. So it doesn't benefit at all, Rinpoche says. So for instance, in the case of the TV, if we really wanted to protect it, we should put some metal box over it and not touch it ever. So that would really be effective. But somehow we feel when we worry about it, we're protecting it in that way. So our constant worry, our constant obsession with the object, in other words, this kind of the way this attachment manifests by worrying, etc. So that doesn't protect the TV in any way. It doesn't protect our objects of attachment. It doesn't make any difference. It's not realistic. And what's worse, not only does it not benefit us, not only does it help us to protect the object, to make sure it doesn't break or we don't lose it. What's even worse is it makes us deeply unhappy. Having attachment, it creates this mental pain, this mental kind of unhappiness, which is worse as opposed to not being useless.
추중인 상황다 조지디다 주연의 지딘되샤 다 나수 카도 하고도 해드리다 딜레마 띵 서버디 단단 줘요만 두고 말해 난 되샤디 카도다 가서 우리 的修进体育不的，社会思想下的都是。다 뇌샤 고디 다리 가서 차상 쉬자 음도 다 가서 다리 산난 사만 단디 주고를 쉬대이 다나 신기 안다다 shum바티 줄을 동의 제당다 디수 간데스 지유에 고디안 산난 무진 단디 주고들 다나시 가서 뒤에 용거라다 안다 무스 야 레베 카토딜라 간데 제고 그래 뒤준도 당안다 휴진 매베 그 뒤준도 당안아서 다보이나 상상한다 유 상상 매베 순데 인디간다 지당기 미지기다 안다라 안다 용수는 디데 제고 그래서 동의 제당 디시고로 세상 양안다 무슬레베 카톨라 간데 제고르스 슈침부 진슈 슈침부 예베 카톨라 로 간데 제고르스 디주데디 데 산나니 차상 디고르 슈데 인세상 다리 슈차 슈차 민도 다리 제와 가시시 레디 딜러 렌 가시 지아나 진수
So anyway, when it comes to attachment, well, one aspect, of course, the way it harms us, or the harmful aspect, is really that it makes us unhappy, and we don't need to go into much deeper aspects of its deeper kind of explanations on how it harms us. Anyway, so Rinpoche says for today that should be enough. I mean, to address this, well, the idea of attachment, of course, but also what Rinpoche would like to talk further about is like what to do, not just with our attachment, but also with getting depressed and anxiety. So Rinpoche will talk about this in the next few days. How can we deal with these kind of mental states? How to deal with them when they actually arise? So sometimes, of course, they're there and sometimes they're not there. So what can we do when they're not there? How can we prepare ourselves or avoid them becoming active, these negative states of mind? Or what can we do when they arise very strongly, when they strongly rise in our mind? How can we deal with them then? So these are all issues Rinpoche will address tomorrow and the day after. But anyway, regarding today's lesson, well, there are a few questions Rinpoche would like to answer.
运气没有工作，如何在日常生活里获得来自社会自我价值感？应该怎么禅修？他的不跨越个当，那个没别个了，基座难落了，卡说是，但叔叔的人堂，叔叔的名字了，人堂越被超的看的是，那个结果的是我的了。
你怎么看不到题目？
真的没，你看吧那里。
알아요. 있어요.
自我价值感是叔叔的，叔叔的人堂越被超的，刚才是那个结果的是全大的了。
OK.
但对了，其他的不可被个人的，那个没被个人的，今天一搞脏了，基础难路了，卡说的，每个叔叔的做抢救的上路当叔叔一那样卡说，但叔叔的被基础的恰些基因吧当，你叔叔每次的去短的点不是了，我的样短有不基因上被超的，累的，但对军的呢，不对军的呢，叔叔的每次了，搭档的确定就我的三个都是。
Now, here, one of the questions, Rinpoche first read it in Chinese and then explained the question. So, well, the first question here is like, what to do if you're pregnant and you're unemployed. So you're having a child and you're unemployed. So basically having a lot of problems. How can I recognize at the time of, well, having a child or carrying a child, being unemployed, like what can I do at the time of great difficulty to recognize the value of life? And Rinpoche explained it like even the meaning of like, how can we do that?
手机呢是没差的哟的，但第一哪呢？你家具的啷个哪所去了？但刚来咖啡看多了，自我价值感的，不，叔叔的 value 的，叔叔的人堂同于路的嘛， 휴춘유차 다 자주기 랑가디 게네야 지 사제 지부순이 지 레베 카도디라 아니 시니 수수미실의 린당통 루레디 상루 가 상루 동당기 체버지 리그리 상도 상낭루라 파 통동치 가서 그래 차상지 미치 인도당 차상지 마대버지 통동지 낭루 뒤주 통동지 낭루 대대버이나 상디 리그어레스다.
So Rinpoche says, well, actually, we're part of society. So to make our life meaningful, really, well, it very much depends on our attitude. We need to regard ourselves as part of society, recognize that. But also Rinpoche says, well, actually, our life is pretty long, actually. I mean, in terms of all the things that can happen in one life. So from that perspective, there's so much that can happen. And oftentimes the situation is such that when things go wrong, when they don't go the way we want them to go, then we're not able to see the value of life. We don't see a real meaning in life. Versus when things are really going well and we accomplish everything that we want, well, at that time then of course we see a value in life, we see a meaning in life. So it's clear that this is very much dependent on our attitude, our way of thinking, how we react to a certain situation, whether we see a value in life or a meaning in life or not. But anyway, we should also recognize that certain problems are pretty short-lived in relation to our entire life.
차천에 있는 루지기 뒤시기 넘버 디페 세부요리다. 공카다 야가 바로라 체바 침부요래. 제가다 땡가 이 체바 침부요래. 공카 차천에 있는 별롱바 나다 배는 아소 롱바 요서도 있나. 장홍부 강지 통해요 맞다. 공카를 배 사상만 뒤차서 가서 그래. 강부차 사마로 자참마 강 아니 배 하버드네 전 텔라페 슈침부 제도 디인디간다 사전 디간의 자지에도 자원의 용사 말에 상상순의 주요하다 사상만 강부차서 세부차서 텔라차서로 다 뒤뒤 저지의 명인순의 전 딜러 자지기리스나 자도 지사 말에 상상순의 주요해 다 이내야 군가바 계제진에 제가로 제가디 춘天로 춘天제가디 최도즈리 최레 디간라 디네지 림베지 에지 무슨 데스 통해요 버지 디네 약간 야 미도 롱바 용주 베 미도당 자당 신가의 디베 hun딩딩 차가다 두스다디야 다베 신가능신지 다 롱바 딘데 주주디 공가 딘데기 롱바 차한도 그랬으나 잔디 이케마 되스는 저 세상 공가 자원이 려메 딩이 순데 주주 두스 니마지니 친시치니야 려요 차임.
So if we just think how quickly things change. So take, for instance, Tibet. Taking that as an example, think of 1 year in Tibet. So in Tibet, you have 4 seasons, very obvious 4 seasons. It's very obvious the differences between, of course, the summer and the winter, spring and autumn and so forth. So when you think of the winter time, in winter time, it's such that it becomes extremely cold and there's not a single plant that is green, and not a single green plant can be seen. So everything dries up basically. So there's a lot of dust in the air. It gets very cold and it looks very kind of plain and depressing, really. So it's possible that at that time when you experience winter in Tibet, you may think, oh, this is going to last forever, this is so horrible, this is never going to stop. So the sense of despair that how can this ever change? But then as spring arrives, it gets a little warmer and little green plants start to appear everywhere. And then they grow more and more and more. And then in summer, it's so beautiful. You have flowers everywhere. Everything is green. It seems like you arrived in a Purim. So in comparison to winter, it's so different. So it's almost like when you see this flowers and all the lush fields and meadows and so forth, there's a sense you cannot believe that it ever looked the way it did in winter. So in that way, therefore, this shows us that it may look really dreary and so forth at certain times, like in winter, but things change and look very different at a different time.
운의 지위는 부코의 거당 내가 매회 거디 배 수진에 디 사망을 연구하러 이 개구지 말에 미 세디 가서 그래 무퇴네 추신바 活着추신바 아니 나자 매바 사주여바 수부디당인바 수부는 나자 매바 디수제디 디수제디 문에이다 디레다 가서 그래 자치슈이들이다 다 디문에 자네기 디 가서 신탕여바디 어디리다 할레베 신탕 친구리 수부디당 나자 매바 디수제 할레베 신탕리 아니 디토네 신다 참을도 디가는 용거리다 갈리갈리 용거 디가는
而事实上呢，在怀孕没有工作这些状态根本没有什么啊，不是什么。
That happens. So in reality, being pregnant, being unemployed, I mean, that happens. Of course, that is part of life. It's possible that this happens, but these things we can overcome. So when it comes to this life, for instance, now what's important is to live our life in such a way that we are healthy and we're well. That's most important. So our health, our mental, our physical well-being is so important. And then if other things go wrong, that's not what's really the worst. Most important is to look after our health.
제요다 가rin 있나야 제요 잠을린디나 내가 가rin 있나야 국어디 여버 내가 용해기 가서 그랬디 주체 차상
So therefore, if you're healthy, if you're strong enough, then everything will come. I mean, you will be able to overcome all the challenges, all the problems you may temporarily face. So if on the other hand, you have good job, you have a great house, you have a lot of possessions, but your health is poor, well, how do these external things like a beautiful house and so forth, how do they benefit you really? So most important is to feel healthy, to be strong, and on that basis you can work towards accomplishing everything else.
那只要你我的心总是有执念，应该怎么禅修？他大家学的执念是对下顺着是古越级的，他三囊落了，我看说人咱们这忙不成的顺着，说执着，对下顺着的那第一呢的，大家俺说刚了学的，他三年那你没对你这些的加个罗，刚的三囊。咱们这前的所这的看这是干过谁的，但是的上年那你没听地过这些建议，咱们先地过了许个名字的。
So the second question is about a kind of state of mind. I suppose it means something like desire. Rinpoche said it seems like it means this term he used in Chinese. It seems it's all about attachment. And so the question is how to overcome that, how to overcome all these obsessive thoughts we have as a result of such. And Rinpoche says, well, he's not going to answer this because this is what Rinpoche will talk about in the coming days. So there's no need to answer this here.
Mm. 那第三个问题就是被父母催婚，压力很大，应该怎么长修？他第一要么是怕嘛给出来的，画面断了，拉出去了。你大上下这个嘞，起因是了，像这个现在压力越过给，年收越过给要嘛的，那出了催，告诉嘞，这多催，出了都是爹说那怕。底钱的这个，店的这个咯，吃了没吃饭了，给没多。
Okay, so I didn't get the question, but I kind of read it in Chinese, but I guess the question is about what do you do if your parents keep nagging you or something? I think that's from the context, that's what I got. So Rinpoche says, well, in that situation, just say, okay, they're okay, I'll try, I'll do it, but don't let yourself being pressured. So you could tell them that they'll be
摧毁，摧毁，
对方催你的话，你就说不急不急，这样就好了。
Okay,
不
this
是
one I
你
didn't
也
get.
摧毁
催他什么啊？我怎么催呢？他叫我结婚，我怎么催他呢？我怎么催？
啊，不是，比如파마기 술을 대소나 양주 파디지니 파마라 파도시지니로 nga chila keme sala pa desla gura da ganda o dagin jisung da dagin jisung
So actually, yeah. So but they don't let yourself to be
遇到
pressured.
情感困扰应该怎么但的的뒤로 디 준디레 다 미망불라 디 용고르다 디 가서 지동기 강에 디 용거리 디 개요 말에 이내야 지동기 강에 용배 가도 디라 조디 상단에 디 유시 창버지 렌도민도로 원에 줄了원에 이다 핀도 여버지 렌도민도 수수로 원에 창버지 렌도민도 원에 구버지 렌도민도 간다 다기 공도 쉬바나신 디 가서 그래 초지부지 초지부지를 때문에 타지 마제버지 情绪的 emotion 基本的 때문에 타지 마제버지 싫어를 때문에 타지 제제나 인간의 디시투레스
Sorry, this is a little hard to answer. Anyway, Rinpoche said previously with regard to the other question, so even if your parents nag you and keep saying do this, that, and the other, well, tell them don't be in a rush. Don't be in a rush. So kind of like say you will give it your best, but don't let yourself being pressured. So that's what Rinpoche said again. And here it's like Rinpoche talked about seeing something as precious, but I'm not sure in what context. So it could mean like in terms of self-worth or being seen as being respected by others. I don't know. This is why Rinpoche just read it in Chinese. So, but Rinpoche's response was like, well, don't let yourself being overwhelmed by your emotions, but rather apply wisdom. It's important to apply wisdom. So sorry, I missed a part of that.
나디 저왕아버지도 딩에 야부 구우면도 가르쓰기에나
第五个
受外境的第五个问题
真不太懂。
受外境的影响太严重，自我有意识，但是调整不理想，应该怎么讲究？受外境的影响太严重，自我有意识，第个是我的自我有意识。
So Rinpoche says the fifth question, he doesn't really understand it. And so he asked the Chinese translator about a certain expression. What does that mean?
但是调整不理想呢，我当头们的时候说，是吧？
Cannot change. That's the word, the term here, or the expression cannot change.
是这个意思吗？인사레사.
No.
Is there a way we can get the questions in English?
比如第三路第几个是外境是了，你看到底属于个米的组织植入地主者的查查事情地主者的引起嘞在地区个卡说了偏别恰的有的地区个叔叔了略别恰当地区个专个恰卡的有吧人家卡的卡说了属于有吧地主上路忙死当过来是上路他妈几当我长期调整顶着当图嘛的第上路样样当现在样样当样给上路样样当样给女不的第一测试的啊马龙不赢呢 디 생了修进铁图嘛，生不脚当图嘛的。现在俺做南军第四个多，枪筒呢，叔叔的女友吧，西语是，现在俺枪筒的嘎图我们都是，的卡的结果嘞是俺的条挺的中，的条挺的用的讲了，俺的了喂，这样个枪筒呀个你们还古语喂呢，俺当不的了，我那个这样个枪了你们语吧的卷语吧的西语呗是，我那西语对是，是吧？的西语是。다 창을 님이 가르가르 요래스. 다 님이 니즈만 도마시바 이나 딘 당김이도 님이 내가 님이 마무 치고 창을 님이 가르가르 요봐. 창통을 띠네. 다 변의 창 마무 통바 이나 침발을 뉴그레세도 수부 최대한을 뉴그레세디 지리. 다 창통배 가도 딜라 시바 디차고로 시바 메세오 차고로 가서 그래. 시바 라비즈비 차그래. 진보당 도시 인부 매우 차도 그래. 시바랑신의 미네바 심바딘 항준랑시 내도 말해. 디왕기 아니 담을 마무지기도. 수수 나라 용 수수기 파마동 수수기 부동 아니 자라 베 자신부 디수제디 하무고진 자 라야 라지데디로 喝醉醒过来之后嘞，可的라지에 당사베 지라 아니 시는 저가 지지지네 배 뉴저 롬바강 수도 세상 진짜이 님이 뇌라 님이 만부지 통 님이 통사베 지라 디레 디 당부 통화디 투종기 고들어 니버디 문에 님이 뒤에봐 니버니 자자 자타만 니버 단 니버 장진 되고 말 공고월 양내한도 공고월 그래서 양내한도 공지진이 창라 님이 여버 통일 루디 수수기 공시 란자버지 수마도는 창가도 말 세상 투상 공송세 비 계진부도 니콜라 디지라 디네게 배시 가사 딜레인 사유 창긴 님이 통하게 루디 양양의 공공공지진이 문예기 수수 공신 자토버지 마주마이나 까돼요 말어 세상 지랑기 다기시에디 창기 님이 딩에 하고도 딩에 단도 창통 효우도 까도면도 세디 디리스 가서 그래 계제디 단 디마레스다 창기 님이 통화 장지 창기 님이 가서 창통에 까도그레 세기 딘디셰 야고 말에 세상 창기 계시에단체는 창을 님이 요 통소는 창통도에 까도에 수지 요구수수는 디 용구요 말에 디 순가 창고 그래스 디지러 안 디강 패싱이 딜러베이 창을 오네기 님이 친구 요 통소는 동구 말했어 가레스나 칼라 디나로라 오네기 두요 하고서는 사그레베스 사고 말했어 디 칼라디 두요 시내 가서 그래 사킨 매버 인디가라 디 사킨 참을로기 딘 두요 미시비 다레스
Now, I'm not sure what the question is, but just from the context, it seems that it's about in terms of the external distraction. So the sense objects, the constant exposure to so many colorful distractions. How do you deal with this? How do you work with this? How can I really change when it comes to these distractions? And so Rinpoche said that the first step, what's important is to think of the benefits or the advantages and the disadvantages of this particular situation, all these distractions and so forth. So to think of of course, the aspects that can be beneficial, to also reflect on them, but also to become aware of the dangers or the negative aspects. We need to also consider them and really deeply understand them to then be able to make the appropriate changes. Now, Rinpoche says, sometimes we feel we've thought about something extensively, but still can't make any changes. So there's the sense even reflecting on something doesn't enable us to make changes in our life. And Rinpoche's argument is that he feels then in such a situation, we didn't think about it enough For instance, in one case, someone came to Rinpoche. One person once asked Rinpoche, well, I know alcohol is harmful, but I still can't give up drinking it. And so Rinpoche said, well, it just shows that this person hasn't fully understood what the disadvantages are of drinking alcohol, because if they had really deeply understood it, they would let go of their habit. So to really think, what is it? What are the disadvantages? What are the dangers? For instance, it harms your liver, it harms your entire body. In terms of your mental state, well, once you're intoxicated, you can no longer discern, you can no longer think clearly, you're not able to control yourself. You may even go as far as in an intoxicated state of mind, or in an intoxicated state, to beat up your parents, beat up your child, break things. And only when this intoxication, when it subsides, only then are you able to regret what you've done and really recognize the great harm. Therefore, it's important to not just have a rough sense of what the disadvantages of drinking alcohol or getting intoxicated are, but to apply the three types of three stages of learning about it, reflecting on it, and meditating on it. So in other words, first understanding intellectually what are the disadvantages of getting intoxicated, and secondly, to reflect on them, on these disadvantages, and gain a kind of certainty. And once you've gained that certainty, you need to familiarize yourself with that. So in that way, listening, that is learning, reflecting, and meditating are really important. So that's what I told this person in this situation. So think about the disadvantages of drinking alcohol, getting intoxicated time and again. Otherwise, you can't stop. So just this kind of rough kind of sense of how alcohol harms us is not enough. You need these three stages of learning, reflecting, and meditating. And if we understand, for instance, that if there's a bowl of food and there's poison in there, so if you really understand that this food has been poisoned, you're not going to eat it. And therefore, it's important to understand that it's not enough when we reflect on the disadvantages of something. Sometimes that is not efficient. It doesn't go deep enough in the sense that it's not enough to be able to make these changes. So there's still something lacking. And if someone, for instance, sees this bowl of poison and they say, yeah, I know it's poisonous, and they still eat it, well, that's actually a sign that they don't know how it harms them. They don't know it's poisonous. They don't know the disadvantages in terms of the physical reaction to such poison and so forth. So therefore, Rinpoche says we need to go deeper. Yeah. So that's enough for today. Let's recite some prayers together. But the session, well, today's lesson is complete, and Rinpoche will continue tomorrow.
다리 뒤 넘버 수